Hello, welcome back to my fave fanfics. Here, I post, well, my favorite fanfictions, if that wasn't obvious. I do hope you'll enjoy them as much as I do. Please like and subscribe for more content. Without further ado, let's get started.
Welcome to the fourth part of What If Toshiro Hitsugaya Was Sent to Hogwarts, Season 2 Finale. Credit goes to SapphireMoons. Chapter 15. All is as it should be. Feeling sentimental? Snape drawled in his usual condescending tone, as the memory of a first-year Harry before a mirror that reflected his parents' smiles, popping in uninvited as Hitsugaya merely looked at the sight from the background impassively. He hadn't paid the thought of parents or such things of the sort in years. With a soft twinkle, the three of them were once more in Snape's office, Snape and Hitsugaya lax at the potion stations. Harry glared lowly as he practically snapped his protest. That's private. Not if you cannot master occlumency in time, Potter, Toshiro noted idly, his icy expression cool. I believe I have already gone over this with you weeks ago. Clear your mind and do not fall for the images that Snape and I conjure to make you falter. And as far as you are concerned, Potter, you have no privacy, Snape added, his voice dark and looming. And not to the Dark Lord, if you don't improve. Every memory he has access to is a weapon he use against you. You won't last 2 seconds if he invades your mind. At the words of insult, Harry gripped the arms of his chair in restraint. You're just like your father, Snape snapped coldly, his words more bitter by the letter. Lazy. Arrogant. Don't say a word against my father. Harry stood abruptly, yelling as the captain merely watched his irritation growing at the inevitable shouting match. The potion's master ignored him. Weak. I'm not weak. Quote. Then prove it, Snape hissed. Control your emotions. Discipline your mind. Enough. The student and professor turned to the only other person in the office, his teal orbs in a half-hearted glare that made Harry hesitate and Snape silent, which was doable for the captain's intent. The both of you are inadequate to continue as of now. Potter clearly cannot clear his thoughts or mind upon anything seeing as you have clouded it with anger, Professor. While you, Potter, being ever so sensitive to the topic of your deceased parents still despite being upon your 16th year of age, are, therefore, dismissed. I will see you in the dorm in a later hour. The captain glared to ensure that his words were not defied, and with a hardened glare toward Snape, the tension in the room was eased. A little more than several minutes later, a stoic ice captain faced a studying Snape in the empty office. He broke the silence first. Potter is vulnerable, and at the rate which his lessons are going, the Dark Lord will not have any problem with breaking him. With ease. Of course he is. The ice captain replied bluntly, fingering his wand. But he will not learn adequately if you are insulting him with the fact that his parents are dead and continuously reminding him of that fact. We do need him alive, Professor. Unfortunately, Snape added with a curl of his lip. Then what do you suggest? Seeing how our methodology has gotten us so far with Potter. Quote. The captain had the decency to look thoughtful. That depends. The potion's master was curious as he rose a brow. On? Quote. Toshiro looked at Snape with a smirk, chilling involuntary shivers down the professor's spine. Whether or not, you will allow me to bring a few, the transfer paused, frowning. Family members. The following week, Harry was seated in Snape's office once more, only with a new arrival who giggled behind a large rainbow lollipop, her pink cotton candy hair a stark beacon in the room as Harry looked at Hitsugaya with obvious confusion. Yachiru, in the other hand, studied the boy before her with wide dark pink eyes, her bobbed hair framing her porcelain skin as a crossbones hairpin adorned her hair. Licking the lollipop that Shuru had bought her on the way, The lieutenant frowned behind her sugary treat, grabbing the 10th Division captain's ebony shirt, matching her own Gothic-styled dress. Turning to the younger, the captain rose an eyebrow, noting the frown. Kusajishi? Quote. He's weak. Yachiru murmured, as the two children ignored Harry entirely as he stared. So weak that Maki could wipe the floor with him. Blindfolded. Toshiro nodded. Yes, Kusajishi. I am well aware. But he needs help in the form of which only you can give him. Really? Me? The pink-haired girl's eyes widened dramatically as the ice captain nodded, unfazed as she began to rant. What's wrong with him? Do you want me to teach him how to fight? We can bring Ken-chan and you guys can try to see who gets in more kills. I'm on Kenny's team. You can be on the other team, Shuru. With Boobies, Bayaki, and Ichi and... Quote. We are not bringing Zaraki, Yoruichi, and Kurosaki here, Kusajishi. The pink-haired girl pouted. Then what are we doing? Quote. You're going to be using your Ryotsu. Yachiru looked at him with a strange look. Mine? Quote. The captain nodded as he sent a knowing look to his younger sister. You can withstand the pressure of Zaraki's vast Ryotsu with ease, and not to mention are the lieutenant of the 11th Division. Do not tell me that you are as childish as you appear, Kusajishi. Yachiru blinked at the captain before grinning cutely with a giggle, poking his cheek with her lollipop stick, the candy gone. You're so nice, Shuru. Focus, Kusajishi. Hitsugaya growled, slapping the stick aside, as the younger nodded happily. Potter. Harry's head snapped up at the mention of his name. This is my younger sister, Kusajishi Yachiru, lady of the House of Yamamoto. She's going to assist me in teaching you occlumency. Her? Harry blinked confusedly as Yachiru smiled at him childishly, nodding. But she's like 8, Hitsugaya. How can she help you teach me? Quote. She has more control than you do over her spiritual powers, and not to mention, emotions, Potter. Toshiro snapped, ignoring the flinch in Harry's form at the mention of his lack of control. And to the added fact that she is not going to be doing anything to which she will be harmed. That within itself is a difficult task to adhere to. Like you can say that, Shuru ni. Yachiru giggled as Toshiro glared daggers at Harry that said, if you dare repeat that nickname I will throw you into the pits of hell to rot for eternity. Harry did not repeat the name. So, what are we going to do if I can't kill anything? Quote. Harry felt bile lurch in his stomach as he watched the little girl in near tears at the disappointment of not killing something, pouting at her older brother, who was unperturbed. Hitsugaya whispered something in Japanese that made the girl perk up as he revealed a cardboard packet that made Yachiru's eyes sparkle. Ripping open the thing, the girl revealed a cellophane bag that was promptly torn open, thin sticks of pink-colored biscuits in display. Popping them in her mouth, Yachiru continued in strawberry-flavored bliss. She's going to be your reinforcement and helping hand, Toshiro said, as the boy who lived turned to his cohort. While I attack your mind, it is not legilimens. I am invading your mind in a more severe form of magic, and it will be painful. You will have 13 tries to block or at the very least, not react to my attack or show me a blank mind. 13 tries? Harry echoed, confused as he did not realize that Yachiru had disappeared. What happens if I don't? Quote. Then I kill you. Yachiru piped up sweetly from behind as the boy who lived jumped back in surprise, as she laughed. Just kidding. It's not going to be that fun, but we're playing a game. It's Shuru ni against me in glasses. Quote. Wait. Harry waved a hand. You're going to help me, Kusajishi? Quote. Yachiru. The girl corrected as she nodded. Shuru ni could overpower you with a wave of his hand, but with me, you can survive. I think. Pretty sure. He'll be fine. Toshiro waved aside as if it were a minor side effect as he gestured to the thin blade in Yachiru's hand. But if you fail to control your emotions, Potter, I have ordered Kusajishi to overpower your mind and let you suffer the consequences of my attacks and hers, which will grow more severe as you fail. Harry felt like he was going to throw up. Why, the knife? Quote. My sister likes sharp toys, Toshiro shrugged before adding an afterthought. And it's not like if you're of any use if you're mentally incapable after this. You'd be more use as a martyr. No need for you to be entirely useless after your mind has been broken. Hitsugaya lowered his teacup within the library, hidden within the shelves when a familiar Ryotsu neared him as he paused in his browsing. It was finally the weekend and the captain had decided to let the DA off for the day, seeing how they were progressing moderately, having learned several destructive spells to counter their enemies should they ever needed to. It was at one point Granger had stopped him after one session as to why he wouldn't teach them Kido, only Weasley and Potter present. But the captain merely rose an eyebrow at the question before informing them bluntly why. None of you are spiritually aware enough. The ice captain had indeed considered teaching the children Kido, at least in Bakudo, considering the damage that children could make with Hado. With the damage that they potentially in wielding is already enough, adding wandless magic would only fan the fires. The trio, of course, demanded an explanation for this, but the captain gave them none. Explained to them that the highest level in Ryotsu that they could climb to was to his 10th seat, and that Dumbledore's was at the level of a lieutenant with their limiter on? And that they could see him in his soul form was a feat within itself? That was one conversation that Hitsugaya was not looking forward to if he could help it. Speaking of things he could help with. Toshiro. Malfoy appeared around the corner, his blonde locks ruffled stylishly as the badge of the Inquisitor squad gleamed brightly over his school robes, his face in a tired deadpan. I am going to kill you and then bring you back to kill you again for the torture you have condemned me to. The captain smirked at his friend's words, teal orbs reading the book in his hands. Come now, Draco. Surely, the Inquisitor squad couldn't have been that bad? Quote. Umbridge cannot shut up about how proud she is of us, for distinguishing ourselves from the mudbloods or the great service of our duties to the ministry. I swear if I hear her so much as whisper another praise about the Minister of Magic, I am going to vaporize her. Malfoy swore as he folded his arms in with a glare. Toshiro was unmoved by his friend's troubles, only flipping a page in mock disinterest as Draco's glare landed on his friend. When are you going to let me cue Umbridge anyway? Draco demanded, eyeing the captain. Didn't you say that you were going to inform me a week earlier? Quote. The teal gaze finally broke away from the book as the captain fished out a thin bottle. Give this to Umbridge and inform her that it was from me. She will understand, while you, Draco, in 2 days' time, catch Cho Chong if you would, and with your timing, allow Umbridge to administer the potion to Chong. This? Draco rose and brow at the vial, its glass a deep green. Gray eyes narrowed as he connected the 2 and 2 together. Truth serum? Quote. Of the strongest version, Toshiro confirmed, returned to his book. But if Chong reveals everything, then... Exclamation mark. Draco looked at his friend with mixture of incredulity and worry. What happens if... Quote. Do not worry, Draco. The ice captain smirked darkly, teal orbs flickering to meet gray ones. Everything will play out as it should. It was the following morning to which the captain was stirring a half-teaspoon of sugar into the blackest coffee he could find. Anyone who saw the captain knew better than to speak before he had dangerous chemicals flowing in his bloodstream. Exchanging breakfast for a scone and coffee for the dawn of the day, Toshiro barely reacted as Neville read the Daily Prophet aloud, seated across from him. We have confirmed that 10 high-security prisoners in the early hours of yesterday evening did escape. And of course, the Muggle Prime Minister has been alerted to the danger. We strongly suspect that the breakout was engineered by a man with personal experience in escaping from Azkaban, notorious mass murderer, Sirius Black, cousin of escapee Bellatrix Lestrange. Headlines glared ebony as Neville lowered the papers with a thin frown, as the captain blinked, reading impassively. Ministry angers centaurs. Like that's a surprise. Toshiro snorted, declining any cream into his coffee. Bane has been informing me that the only wizards allowed into the Forbidden Forest are the select few of Dumbledore, Hagrid, and myself. Everyone else be damned to an onslaught of arrows. Ah, they're uptaking Soul Society's characteristics. Sephiroth smirked with mirth. Shoot for dead first and then ask questions later if necessary. As far as the first and second division go, at least. Toshiro acknowledged. Oh, of course, Master. SapphireMoons nodded. You ask questions first, and based upon whether it was worthy or not, then, you decide execution. You are kinder than you look, Master. Before the captain could retort, a voice cut in, whispering for once as she seated beside him, Potter and Weasley on the other end with Longbottom. Dumbledore told Fudge this was going to happen. Granger pointed to the Daily Prophet, splayed before them. He's gonna get us all killed just because he can't face the truth. A rather dim morning, isn't it? Longbottom smiled weakly as the trio looked at him in full gloom agreement, while Hitsugaya appeared to be nursing his head on the table, coffee abandoned for the headache. A minute later, a teal orb cracked open to glare for a moment when it was hidden once more, having deemed the incoming Ryotsu none of his concern. Harry, the hesitant voice of Seamus Finnegan echoed as all of them turned to the new arrival, but the now napping captain. I wanted to apologize. Surprised looks from the foursome mirrored each other as their cohort continued. Now, even me mum says that the prophet's version of things don't add up, so, what I'm really trying to say is that, I believe ya. How interesting. Toshiro noted dully, not lifting his head from the pillow of an opened potions textbook. Finnegan finally believes in Potter after his mother has finally seen the light of what is really happening to the Muggle and Wizarding world. It's always entertaining to watch the ignorant to realize of the degree of their obliviousness, Master. You were rather adamant about it, considering the beating of Cornelius Fudge. Sephiroth noted. Although, it was surprising how you did not want the scientist to lobotomize his memories or beliefs for Voldemort. Of how the Dark Lord is not dead. Toshiro clarified, lifting his head to drink his coffee, ignoring everything else around him as the younger dragon nodded. The Minister of Magic is known for his firm beliefs of Voldemort's death. SapphireMoons reminded. To camouflage that the fact of the real minister had been preoccupied for a while, our master believed that keeping the minister's ignorance would curb any suspicions. Using any memory wipe would have caused a Ryotsu residue within the minister, therefore, I had to request the assistance of Soifan and Kuratsuchi. Soifan, for some convincing with her boggarts, and Kuratsuchi with altering the minister's memory through a formal lobotomy with the help of several false memory charms. Except for the incident with Matsumoto having entered with the head captain in a particularly bloody aspect of the surgery, the result was well finished. The Zanpakuto rose a skeptical eye. How well, Master? Toshiro only smirked outwardly in response, startling several of his cohorts within potions, the first class after breakfast. Throwing in several bloodroots and sheathing his silver knife, the captain continued with his day, fatigued but surprisingly avid enough to be thoroughly amused. Yachiru poked Harry's cold cheek with his wand, having stolen it in the middle of the fourth and fifth try, a thoughtful look on her face as Hitsugaya hovered over them. Sighing, the ice captain nodded as the lieutenant cupped her hands to amplify her voice. Glasses. Wake up. With a kick to the navel for good measure, Yachiru grinned with content as Harry's eyes snapped open, relatively okay other than slightly winded and coughing. Did I do it? The boy who lived coughed thickly, his voice clogged. A head of white entered his vision as he caught something close to an indifferent glare and a curious head of pink off to the side, twirling his wand. A sigh. It's a start. Bombarda Maxima. Harry grabbed Colin out of harm's way from the explosion courtesy of Umbridge as dust and small rocks rained over them, relatively unscathed as their secret was, understated ly, found out. Gathering himself, the bespectacled boy glared as his green eyes caught the pink outfit of a smug Umbridge with her Inquisitor squad behind her along with Filch in the tow. Harry froze. In Malfoy's sneering grip was Cho. The beautiful girl of his dreams was despondent, head hung heavily with guilt as her eyes were hooded by her ebony bangs, too ashamed to face her fellow members. Staring almost dumbly, the boy who lived almost missed Umbridge's words, still the same sickened honey that he heard at the Grand Hall. Get them. And with a flurry of protests, yells, and sneers, they were caught. Wands confiscated in a line so that Umbridge was able to execute her punishment effectively. Harry held back his tongue, well aware that if he spoke, it would likely cause more damage than help at this point. Obviously singled out as the leader of Dumbledore's army, Harry found himself being dragged to Dumbledore's office, silently tearing Cho beside him. Before Harry could even fathom the thought to comfort the crying girl, Percy, the bloody git of a traitor, manhandled them in, to reveal Cornelius Fudge himself, with a lapdog in the form of Umbridge, sided by two Aurors that he knew. John Dawlish and Kingsley Shacklebolt. Been spying on them for weeks. Cornelius, I pled you to look at the evidence before you. Umbridge practically begged as she turned her glare at the headmaster, the minister, surprisingly aloof as if he knew this from the beginning. All of your fear-mongering about you-know-who never fooled us for a minute. A smokescreen for your bid to seize control of the ministry. Naturally, Dumbledore deadpanned as Harry could have sworn that he appeared almost at ease on his desk. No, Professor. Harry spoke up, as he looked at the professor with plead before glaring at the minister. He had nothing to do with it. It was me. Quote. Most noble of you, Harry, to shield me, but as it has been pointed out, the parchment clearly says, Dumbledore's army, not Potter's. Dumbledore stated simply, as another voice added to it. Nor Hitsugaya's for that matter. Snape entered with the said transfer in the tow, both taking to the middle of a stumped Potter and a smug Umbridge. I had instructed Harry and Mr. Hitsugaya to form this organization. And I alone, am responsible for its activities, Dumbledore confessed, as Cornelius Fudge almost gleamed with triumph. Dispatch an owl to the Daily Prophet. The minister ordered. If we hurry, we should still make the morning edition. Dawlish, Shacklebolt, you will escort Dumbledore to Azkaban to await trial for conspiracy and sedition. Nearing with bouts of intimidation, if the minister was hoping for effect, he was sorely disappointed. Instead, the headmaster merely stood with a small gasp as if he had incidentally misplaced something. I thought we might hit this little snag. Dumbledore stood with a smile filled with mirth. You seem to be laboring under the delusion that I'm going to, what was the phrase? Come quietly. Well, I can tell you this. Dumbledore shrugged, his words blunt. I have no intention of going to Azkaban. Enough of this. Umbridge whispered, his anger no longer subtle as she snapped swiftly. Take him. Quote. With a wink toward a befuddled Harry's way, the headmaster disappeared in a burst of flames as he met clapped hands with Fawkes, the Phoenix effectively allowing his master escape as the group members of the Ministry were pushed back, Harry and Cho too hit by the blast of hot airs as Snape and Hitsugaya merely turned away with a wrinkled sniff. And with a playful crackle, the Phoenix and headmaster were gone. Regaining themselves, the minister could only cough dryly as Shacklebolt commented with a shrug. Well, you may not like him, minister, but you can't deny, Dumbledore has got style. Regardless of the means of which the headmaster has escaped, Toshiro deadpanned, taking the attention toward the youthful transfer. We are without a headmaster in Hogwarts at the moment, minister, along with a defendant on the loose. I don't suppose you have any ideas to resolve these matters? Quote. A honeyed chuckle echoed as all eyes turned to Umbridge. Anyone could have seen the glee in the witch's eyes. Mr. Hitsugaya. Please sit. Toshiro did as he was instructed, his composure not faltering in the least as he lowered himself on the pink armchair of the headmistress' office. Like her previous office, pink covered every centimeter of the chambers, china plates projecting young kittens along with laced tables that screamed crazy cat lady. But the captain appeared to be at ease, bored out of his skull almost as his gaze regarded the witch across from him to be less than an insect. Congratulations on your promotion, headmistress. The captain began, his chin cupped in his hand, his sealing bracelet gleaming in the dim lighting. What can I do for you on this festive night? Quote. The Toad Professor's smile widened. I merely wanted to thank you for assistance for subduing Dumbledore. Your contribution of my request along with the timing of which my squad had acquired a member of the proxy army was most useful. Which is why you are currently here and not being punished with the rest of the army. She's being polite. Sephiroth noted. That could either mean she wants something from me or she is just about ready to cut me at the throat. Toshiro hummed nonchalantly, not exactly bothered by the words. I have all the cards in place now. How kind of you. Toshiro hummed, his words monotone. But I would hardly think that this is a meeting of which you are here to befall me compliments. And you are correct, my dear. She dropped 2 sugar cubes into her tea before stirring it with a soft clink. Taking a gulp, the professor continued. I am curious. Why? Quote. The captain rose a brow toward his hairline. Why did you choose to give me the Veritaserum just 2 days before my squad had gotten their hands on a member of the DA? Quote. Wouldn't you have requested it from Professor Snape if I had not supplied it to you? The captain feigned ignorance as the headmistress relaxed the slightest bit, believing she had a slight upper hand. Never. I suppose, Mr. Hitsugaya. Umbridge breathed the tea before her nose, lidding her eyes before they flickered ominously to the captain. But I hope you would continue to display these gifts of loyalty before me in future, as my wild card and knight within the enemy lines, if you will. And I shall bestow upon you whatever it is you wish. Power, fame, fortune, honor, whatever it is your heart desires. There was a small silence before the white-haired student began to laugh to the eyesore of a headmistress' surprise. His laughter was dry and breathy, as if an ancient god was amused at a mortal's gall. Whatever my heart desires, you say? Toshiro held back a snort, only allowing an amused smirk. These gifts of loyalty, headmistress, are, indeed as you say, gifts. But do not be mistaken. His voice was low as the headmistress noticed that her office was deathly silent. Even her kittens did not dare to utter a peep. I allowed you to become the High Inquisitor, set up your little group to do your dirty work, have your investigation of the facility and even the position of headmistress. I have no loyalty to you, nor do I desire to succumb to any of your bribes of power. Did you truly believe that you became the headmistress of Hogwarts by your own power? Do not flatter yourself. His voice grew mocking. Knight within the enemy lines? Wild card? Single quote quote. You should know your place as a half-blood yourself, headmistress. A witch with muggle blood in her veins daring to offer me, a pureblood, such trivial things? Fame? I have that whether I wish to or not. Power, honor, fortune? I have more than you, even with your new title. The captain deadpanned, smirking internally as he noted the witch's flinch at the mention of her blood status, resuming his laid-back posture as the new head of Hogwarts began to turn red. I have no intention nor need for that matter, of helping you nor being anything of the sort. I am loyal to nothing but myself and my society. Your position was allowed because it was convenient for me. Then, what can I do to have you on my side? Her words were soft. You bargain with me, headmistress. Toshiro smirked as he stood, turning to the exit as Umbridge frowned, confused. I am not the one on the other side of the ministry. I have no interest in the ministry, nonetheless its existence. But how I can manipulate it to my advantage, I do. Therefore, give me something to work with. I have allowed your invasive ways upon the facility and even the highest position despite your bloodline. Now, reciprocate. The captain finished in a whisper, about to take his leave when a crash of china made him pause, turning halfway. On the other side of the desk was a fuming Umbridge, as she held her wand out as she neared the captain, who regarded her wand for what it was. A stick. Are you threatening me, Mr. Hitsugaya? Her whisper was soft. Am I? Hitsugaya echoed, unfazed as he kept his voice calm. You asked me why, headmistress. And as a student, I shall give you my answer. Why? It grew louder as she bellowed. Why? Exclamation mark. Why did you? Before it grew soft once more. Simple. Toshiro smirked as he repaired the mess with a wave of his wand before pausing the U-wood at the headmistress' neck. To show useless politicians that as much as you wish to have power, there is always someone above you, and more often than not, as much as you try to climb to my position, you will always be the insect that grovels at my feet. Therefore, know your place, half-blood. Umbridge grew a smirk of her own. Then you should know yours, my dear. The following morning, Hitsugaya stood before McGonagall, his demeanor rather indifferent as the Transfiguration professor was rather appalled. It was before classes had yet to start, and here the transfer was, instead of being at breakfast, he was handing in his detention slip, courtesy of the headmistress. McGonagall ran a hand over her face, her expression obviously in concealed distress. It has yet to be the start of the morning class, and you already have a detention slip to inform me of, Mr. Hitsugaya? She frowned as she read the parchment. For rude implications toward faculty? What on earth did you say to Dolores, Mr. Hitsugaya? Quote. I called her an eyesore since her arrival, dared to refuse her offer into eventual serfdom, and may have directly, threatened to have either inflict mental possession, painful torture, or death without it being traced while insulting her tainted bloodline. I don't particularly believe that she took it well. I was improper with my words in my previous conversation with the headmistress. Toshiro replied simply as the head of Gryffindor sighed, the young captain ignoring the laughter of his wand guardian and Zanpakuto. You know, I thought that you didn't care to blood relations, master? Sephiroth inquired as the captain sighed, agreeing. I don't. Toshiro replied bluntly. However, the social aspect of this realm is that purebloods are above half-bloods, then mudbloods are scorned. Considering Umbridge had lied of her proud, pureblood lineage when she actually was a half-blood with a squib for a brother, a weak pureblood father, and a muggle mother, I hit a nerve when I addressed bloodlines. And being a pureblood, you are the epitome of what she can't be. Sephiroth stringed together as Hiranmaru shrugged. Psychological torture lasts longer than physical ones. I understand that the facility is a bit strained due to the change of authority, but we must adjust and make do with what we can. Do you understand, Mr. Hitsugaya? Quote. Yes, Professor. Toshiro nodded when McGonagall eyed him before sighing. And with that, the captain left, the slip smirking in his hands. There was a collective silence when the captain entered the grand hall with everyone else seated, detention starting for 5th years and above, as all of the elder members of the DA shot him looks of concern. Apparently upon the summons of Umbridge, the rest of Army believed that Hitsugaya had a personal detention with the new headmistress, only confirming this when he showed up in the dorms with a detention slip, value being for the rest of the week. Instead of the usual large dining tables, the hall was held moved desks, situated in rows as it would a classroom with a single podium where Dumbledore would usually hold announcements. Now, a smug and victorious Umbridge took his place, seated in a grand, golden throne, donned in dark pink robes as she nursed a cup of tea. Catching sight of the captain, she smiled mockingly as she gestured to the sole empty seat. This one was off to the side, upon the lifted steps of where the professors would welcome the students as they entered Hogwarts. Sideways to face the throne compared to the other fronted desks, it was apparent that the headmistress had plans for the transfer. Toshiro eyed the desk for a half-second before seating himself. At the desk top was the same as the others. A set of papers and an enchanted quill to cut into the writer's flesh for the needed blood. However, the captains differed to an extent, as the quill appeared sharper and leaked a darker ryotsu than the others present. And with a lift of the quill, blood was shed. Snip. The captain paid no heed to his bloodied hand as Yoruichi wrapped it meticulously. Her golden eyes narrowed as she studied her nephew. The moonlight basked over them. Still in his school robes, the captain was studying a set of papers before him, spilled in an organized chaos over the bed in the hospital wing. The number of standards issued being so many that the cuts dug into the flesh to reveal bone, blood drained to the point that the captain was paler than what was seen in morgues. But despite the severity of the wounds, Hitsugaya only brushed it off as if it was a mild scuffle. "How much longer are you going to play with this eyesore?" Yoruichi asked, her expression and words genuinely curious. "I thought that you were going to stop after she became headmistress." "I was." Toshiro pursed his lips, eyes still not moving from the papers. "But she needed to have the satisfaction of taking me down for her to be fully satisfied. And then, with the twins' intervention, everything will fall into place." "Everything?" The former 2nd Division captain rose a brow to her hairline. "As far as I can predict at the very least," Toshiro shrugged. "My role over these children has lessened this year, but that does not dictate that Potter may roam as he wishes. Half the time, he is a mere pawn in the chess between Dumbledore and Voldemort." "And you, nephew?" Quote. "A hidden puppeteer in plain sight," Toshiro answered simply. "My role is of a cohort that oversees events. I do not prevent deaths nor do I fight for Potter's existence. I am here upon an investigation that centers over a violation of law upon the afterlife. The fate of the living or their time of death are none of my concern." A playful scoff breathed over the cat-like woman as she ran a hair through the icy child's white tresses. "You are a good liar, Shiro-chan." The said Snowy scowled. "I'm not lying, Yoruichi." "Sure, you're not, Hitsu-chan tilde." The grape-haired woman purred, drawing out the first word deliberately for emphasis. With a tear of tape, the Shinigami finished wrapping the ice captain's hand. "Are you attending for the following year?" Quote. "That depends on the head captain. From the way things are, you are, nephew," the orange-clad woman said with a serious look. "4 Horcruxes have been found, but of the others we have yet to know about? You may have taken a year away for us to examine the Horcrux in detail for the diadem. But the remaining are now a priority, if we wish for the prophecy to play out as we wish. Which would explain why we need to destroy all of them before we can attempt to intervene at Voldemort." Toshiro deadpanned as golden orbs rolled at the captain's jibe. "Therefore, to expedite things, I am needed in Hogwarts once more." "Pretty much." Yoruichi shrugged, her posture relaxed. "Knowing you though, Hitsu-chan, it's Hitsugaya Taicho. You probably have a plan in place already." The ice captain shrugged, indifferent as the woman pouted, outstretched behind her mock nephew. Deciding against poking his face to see his annoyed expression, the grape-haired woman glanced at the window, as the setting sun glowed softly from the stained glass, nodding that it was time she returned. "The end of the examinations, Hitsu-chan." Nodding to the now cat, the ice captain folded the clothing into a thin velvet pocket, enchanted to fit his aunt's things as she took off the bag around her neck. Until examinations. It was several more hours until after curfew that the ice captain sensed a ryotsu near the hospital wing, the dim light of torchlight glowing the night amber. Madame Pomfrey turned in for the night as she deemed that the captain was to stay for the night and not touch his bandages. Within several moments and a thin creak of the doors, a head of silvery white blonde poked out behind them, gray eyes narrowed with concern as they searched the wing. Finally meeting the captain's questioning gaze, Malfoy waved two others with him to follow, revealing them to be Goyle and Crabbe respectively. "Draco, what are you doing here?" Toshiro questioned calmly as the blonde looked at the transfer with a scoff. "Your hand was mutilated in a detention that you could have gone out of, and you ask me, what the bloody hell I am doing here at the dead of the night?" Draco glared with venom, shaking with thin rage, as the captain merely rose a brow at the display of anger, Crabbe and Goyle backing up the blonde. "What do you think I am doing here, Toshiro?" Exclamation mark. Quote. "Be silent, Draco." The ice captain snapped, his words cold, before he sighed, recognizing the look of pain in Malfoy's eyes, threatening to tear. "You are in a hospital, not a playground. And it is not your fault. Umbridge will not suspect anything but loyalty to you and your followers, Crabbe and Goyle included. That's not the matter here." Malfoy hissed in the silence as the ice captain blinked with confusion. "I came because I was worried about you. You. My friend, Toshiro. I can care less what that half-breed, peasant woman thinks of me. But, you." Toshiro stared blankly before he regained his composure, the two muscles clearly displeased at the fact that their leader and friend was distraught. With a soft clear of his throat, Malfoy glared back at the captain. "You're my friend, Toshiro. The only one I can truly trust." The captain filled silently as he smirked softly. "Thank you, Draco. And I apologize for worrying you, but I am fine." The captain held up a hand to Draco's glare. "It was an injury of expectance and in accordance to Madame Pomfrey, I will recover within the following week for examinations." Are you sure?" If anyone noticed the waver in the blonde's voice, they did not voice it. Looking at his friend in the eye, Toshiro nodded. "Yes, Draco. Umbridge's punishments are not to be concerned over." "Very well." Draco breathed, slumping in relief as he loosened his stiffened posture, allowing a moment of breath before he seated himself on the bed adjacent to Toshiro's, facing the captain as his lackeys took to each side. Crabbe and Goyle have been informed of the circumstances, other than the other issue on the home front. "I see," was Toshiro's only reply, having figured as much. "And Umbridge?" Quote. "Crabbe." The blonde's gray orbs commanded quietly. The headmistress was last seen in her office, with what was reported to be a happy expression on her face. Parkinson noted that she had said something about sending a letter to the minister. The shorter lackey nodded, his voice gravelly. "That half-blood has crossed a line," Goyle muttered as his deep voice echoed in the chambers, making all of them turn to the taller. Toshiro rose a brow in question as Malfoy nodded in full agreement with his subordinate and friend's words. Crabbe not one to disagree. Too made his anger evident. "She will rue the day has split the blood of pureblood." Dolores Umbridge, headmistress of Hogwarts, stood as pompously as a thief would upon a stolen home, claiming the land for thine self. The grand hall echoed with silence other than the sound of scratching quills and the occasional sigh of doubt when a difficult question made itself known. Unlike his cohorts, Toshiro was finished with his examinations upon the last day, having completed the questions and enlisted instructions with perfection, but was unable to leave the premises until all had completed the exams. In response, Toshiro was currently taking part in an activity that Matsumoto would have never thought her captain would be caught dead doing. He was napping. Teal orbs lidded and small pink lips slightly agape, the transfer appeared to be out cold, his bandaged hand wrapped with fresh bandages from the morning already darkened with undoubtedly torn flesh. His complexion was pale, but had enough color to not be too overly concerned. However, that did not mean Draco, Harry, Ron, Hermione, and even Goyle and Crabbe were not, if their occasional glances to the unresponsive captain were of any indication. In fact, it wasn't until the second firework, the listed students took notice with the rest of class of the presence of the Weasley brothers' antics. None saw the thin smirk on the captain's lips as the Weasley twins made their appearance, just as the captain disappeared in the crowd. The once headmistress of Hogwarts, and pink, was now a sight behold. Her brown curls singed as more charcoal than pink was evident on her clothing, the black bow of her hair finally rescued from its misery as it hung limply from her cardigan. Not to mention the smell of burnt hair and fireworks over her flowery perfume did not make a pleasant combination. So, when she found Mr. Potter at the base of her chimney with Miss Granger and Mr. Weasley, her patience was thin as it was. "You were going to Dumbledore, weren't you?" she whispered, hovering over a silent Harry Potter. Granger, Weasley, Longbottom, Lovegood, and the youngest Weasley were their audience held by her trustworthy squad. "No," the moment Harry answered. A split second later, a hand slapped over his cheek with a harsh smack. "Liar," she snarled softly, taking a bit of satisfaction that Potter was stunned. "You sent for me, headmistress?" Severus' voice was a godsend. "Snape, yes." Umbridge smiled, her patience fully tested as she turned to the potions professor at the doorway. "The time for answers, whether he wants to give them to me or not." "Have you brought the Veritaserum?" Quote. "I'm afraid you've used up all of my stores interrogating students. The last of the requested list from you, headmistress, was from what Mr. Hitsugaya had reported to me, used on Miss Chong." Harry exchanged looks with his friends as they silently cursed mentally at the revelation. Hitsugaya was working for Umbridge? Exclamation mark. "Unless you wish to poison him. And I assure you, I would have the greatest sympathy if you did. I cannot help you." Snape finished, only to have a figure apparate before them. "But I can." Toshiro Hitsugaya said icily, his glare cold as he held up a vial. Umbridge was only able to smile widely until she was bound with golden chains, the Keto glowing brightly in the dim room, prompting surprised looks from everyone. Toshiro smirked darkly, the vial uncorked in hand. "But not for you, half-breed, or not." Chapter 16. First Encounter. Dolores Jane Umbridge. Half-blood, born to janitorial wizard of the Ministry of Magic, Orford Umbridge, and Muggle mother, Ellen Crackwell, not to mention a squib brother. Currently Senior Undersecretary to the Minister of Magic and the Headmistress of Hogwarts, are, as of this day, stripped of your positions and wand for investigation. Toshiro fought the urge to not smirk as Malfoy read the report with a sneer. Potter and his party free as they quickly recited their need to get to the Ministry of Magic. Snape stood by the door of the pink office, with a glaring and red Umbridge seated across the captain, flanked by Malfoy standing on one side with Crabbe and Goyle on the other after the captain had assured the DA that he would take care of things here. "How dare you?" The former headmistress snarled, unable to break away from the Keto and defenseless as her wand was confiscated and currently Crabbe's plaything. "I am the direct secretary under Cornelius Fudge, the minister, himself. You cannot do this." Quote. "Actually, as the ambassador from the Eastern Wizarding world, I can." Toshiro cut in, hands folded over his lap neatly. "My position in power places me above you by all rights and laws, Umbridge. No longer are you, the direct subordinate of Cornelius Fudge or headmistress of Hogwarts, all for several reasons." Umbridge's confusion along everyone else's was enough to let the smirk slide. "Allow me to explain." And with a snap of his fingers, a set of papers appeared before the captain, contrasting with the dark wood of the desk between them. For sending Dementors to a Muggle neighborhood to silence a 16-year-old underaged wizard, forsaking instruction for the students of Hogwarts, disrespecting the privacy of students and staff alike, abusing seat of power under the guise of a government official, medieval torture of students through the use of blood quills and Veritaserum, and lastly, offending foreign relations with the Eastern Wizarding world. The last thing you need is for me to add is indecency. Although, it is implied rather well. The captain smiled sweetly at the flabbergast of the eyesore's face, everyone present but herself displaying a hint of smug. "Did I miss anything?" Quote. He received something of a choked croak before his smile grew cold. Then enlighten me and the other Slytherins before you, Umbridge. Why, the bloody hell upon the death of your political career, should I even bother allowing you to explain? Quote. By the law of the ministry. Quote. I believe you, and I have already established that the British law holds no authorization over me. Toshiro growled, his impatience displayed in a thin scowl as he snapped off his sealing bracelet, allowing the metal to clang on the tile floors, all eyes widening at the display of strength. Do not test me, Umbridge. You will lose. How dare this, child, Umbridge thought darkly, as her eyes flickered to her wand. If only she had her wand, she could. In that convenient moment, Crabbe had twirled the wand that it was pointing to the ice captain, who regarded her with cool eyes. How she hated those eyes, they were far too intelligent and cold for her liking, too hardened and too careful for her to manipulate. An independent variable that had no weaknesses. No longer. Crucio. Umbridge commanded of her wand, as a beam of ruby shot out of the wand, hitting the captain in full force. The captain lurching forward as it felt as if the wind had been knocked out of him. The sensation was not, in particular, a painful one, but merely uncomfortable, like someone had decided to prod his soul chain and Ryotsu with annoying pinpricks. But for the sake of appearances, the captain forced himself to grit his teeth and glare at Umbridge with an icier than usual glare. His stature faltered as Snape ordered Crabbe to drop the wand. Stupefy. Malfoy growled as the curse was cut off, Toshiro allowing his body to relax. Umbridge stunned as she glared. I believe you have just reserved your cell in Azkaban. Goyle noted thoughtfully as Toshiro resisted the urge to groan but instead, flicked out his own wand. Not without a few improvements, Goyle. Toshiro added frostily as he spoke, his dark glare never leaving Umbridge. Professor Snape, if you could please escort Draco, Crabbe and Goyle out for a moment. I must have this conversation with our former headmistress in private. Snape rose a brow. Under the sworn oath that neither of you will leave the grounds dead from either's hand. Toshiro nodded, eyes still not moving as Snape sighed, before gesturing the other boys to leave with him. Alone, the captain transfigured Hiranmaru into his blade form, sending a glance to Umbridge's widened look before shrugging. Strapping the blade to his back, the captain unsheathed the blade and held it at her neck, the steel glinting as if desiring her blood. Silent due to the wordless spell of Silencio, Umbridge could only stare. Professor Snape had requested both of us leave with our hearts beating. But I must confess that I cannot keep my oath. The captain resisted the urge to smile at the fear in Umbridge's face, a small smirk instead. Don't misunderstand my words. I, most certainly, don't mean you. Umbridge appeared confused. I am already dead. She stiffened so quickly that it may have been mistaken for a heart attack. And what's further amusing, is that now, Dolores Jane Umbridge, do you have any idea who you have offended when I speak for the Eastern Wizarding World? Quote. The captain's smirk disappeared, lips mouthing a false memory charm. Or should I say the Netherworld? Quote. The Department of Mysteries was cold, dark, and in Ron's exquisite opinion, downright eerie. So, with only the lumos of their wands to guide them, the leaders, de facto members of the DA were literally wandering in the dark, trying to find, what the hell were they looking for again? Oh, right. It was that. A bloody marble that Ron swore that if he threw it into the obsidian at his feet, it would save them a heck of trouble. But no. His best friend's green eyes was transfixed upon the bloody thing and looked at him with such desperation for the well-being of his godfather and answers that no one appeared to give him, that he couldn't. The words of escape and finding Sirius to quickly evict the area died a miserable death with that one look that the Weasley summoned every urge to not allow his mouth to say something stupid. Harry. Hermione's voice screamed in the terse air as everyone turned to the brightest witch of their generation. The girl stared down the main walkway, Ron and Harry now registering the heavy footfalls of what was revealed to be the metallic face of a Death Eater. It walked slowly towards the children, deliberate to intimidate. And to the children's dismay, it was working. "We're serious," Harry demanded, all hearing the lace of fear. "You know," the breathy voice replied, condescending as the Death Eater held out a familiar cane. "You should really learn to tell the difference between dreams." And with a wave of his wand, the mask revealed the face of Lucius Malfoy, wisps of ebony dancing over white blonde locks. "In reality, you saw only what the Dark Lord wanted you to see." Harry widened his eyes at the words as he glanced at the prophecy in his hand. Wait, if Voldemort had used legilimency, then why didn't Hitsugaya or Snape say anything when Harry had explained what happened? Why didn't they reassure him that Sirius was fine? That he was okay? "Now, hand me the prophecy," Lucius ordered as Harry turned back to the danger before him. "No time to mull over this now. My friends and I are in danger." Harry berated himself as he glared at the Death Eater, replying with snark. "If you do anything to us, I'll break it. Oh, Harry, mate." A chilling cackle echoed behind the elder Malfoy as she made her appearance. A tall woman with pale skin that rivaled Hitsugaya's, ebony, shining curls trailed down her mid-back as bloody lips pulled to an amused sneer over a strong jaw, long lashes blinking over sadistically mirth-filled onyx orbs. A leather corset fit her curves nicely, as the ebony dress appeared vintage and eerily put together, cross-stitching over her arms making her appearance of a rag doll. "He knows how to play." Bellatrix laughed, thoroughly amused as she cooed, twirling her talon-like wand. "Itty bitty baby, Potter." Bellatrix Lestrange. Neville identified as the boy fought the urge to shake in a mixture of anger and anguish, failing. The witch smiled as she spoke sweetly. "Neville Longbottom, is it? How's Mom and Dad?" Quote. "Better," Neville snapped, lifting his wand. "Now that they're about to avenge." But before the boy could do anything, Harry blocked him with an arm. Bellatrix raising her own in defense with challenging eyes as they were enveloped in a tense stalemate. Breaths were held as Lucius held up his hands in apparent peace offering, wand still in hand. As a precaution, of course. Now, the blonde wizard breathed. "Let's everybody just calm down, shall we?" Quote. Neville lowered his wand. Bellatrix didn't, until the blonde sent her a look. "All we want is that prophecy." Lucius smiled cordially. But Harry was not fooled at the least. "Why did Voldemort need me to come and get this?" Harry demanded, his desperation for information plain. But the Death Eaters, especially Bella, were not concerned in informing the Bane of their lord of anything of the sort. "You dare speak his name?" Bellatrix whispered in anger as she blinked as if in shock of such blatant disrespect of her lord before bellowing. "You filthy half-blood. How dare you?" Quote. "It's all right," Lucius spoke calmly. "He's just a curious lad, aren't you?" Quote. In the midst of the conversation, Death Eaters cornered the children as Ron, Hermione, Neville, Ginny, and Luna turned to each as Harry listened, attention at his school adversary's father. "Prophecies can only be retrieved by those about whom they are made. Which is lucky for you." "Really?" the blonde man noted as he neared Harry, along with the cornering Death Eaters. "Haven't you always wondered, what was the reason for the connection between you and the Dark Lord?" Quote. "Why he was unable to kill you when you were just an infant? He was several meters away. Don't you want to know the secret of your scar? 2 meters. All the answers are there, Potter, in your hand." He was right in front of him, Bellatrix a step behind. "All you have to do, is give it to me. And I can show you everything." Harry glanced at the cloudy orb in his hands. "I've waited 14 years. Lucius had the audacity to color his face with pity. "I know. I guess I can wait a little longer," Harry replied as he glanced back at his friends, pointing his wand at the Death Eater. "Now. Stupefy." Quote. Bane sent the white-haired boy a look. "We can take her?" Quote. "She's of the Ministry, or at least until the paperwork I have sent has been passed. But until then, she is of the Ministry. I had figured that you would like a chat with our headmistress. She is still the one who has placed restrictions upon your land since her entry to the Ministry, after all." 2 minutes later, Toshiro exited the Forbidden Forest as Umbridge was dragged the opposing direction. Malfoy rose an eyebrow at his friend. "What happened to Umbridge?" Quote. Toshiro blinked innocently. "Why am I responsible for the headmistress? As far as I am concerned, I was only supposed to ensure that our hearts were beating once we had left the office." Malfoy's eyes widened as he heard screams of an aged woman and the thunderous gallop of centaurs, turning to his friend to whom he sent a look. Toshiro rolled his eyes and smirked as they walked back to the castle, a chuckling Malfoy beside him. Toshiro glanced at the time turner, hidden in his sleeve. It was almost time. Harry turned in every direction to see each of friends at Wand Point, all of them noting the crumbled pile of stones in the center of the granite mound, their lives in the hands of an individual Death Eater, the most tragic being Neville in the hands of an amused Bellatrix. The prophecy grew cold in his hand, slicked with sweat as he faced a smug Lucius Malfoy. "Did you actually believe, or were you truly naive enough to think, that children stood a chance against us?" Quote. Hermione whimpered softly as Ron and Neville glared defiantly at their captors, Luna and Ginny silent. But all of them watched as Lucius continued, circling Harry with a condescending air. "I'll make this simple for you, Potter." The blonde Death Eater held out a hand as his words echoed. "Give me the prophecy now, or watch your friends die." Harry turned to the lives that were in his hands. Ron's face was red from the chokehold he was held in on his knees, blue eyes wide as blood smeared from minuscule cuts. Hermione was held by the hair, wand at her temple as her eyes held tears that refused to fall out of sheer stubbornness. Luna shifted from her own chokehold, lip busted as blood stained her teeth but eyes bright with defiance. Ginny glared harshly at hers, as she was relatively unscathed other than red scuff marks on her face and the wand at her neck, her eyes displaying her disgust. Lastly, Neville was held by the hair, his neck ready to be sliced wide open, gaze locked on Harry, his request clear. He couldn't. They were his friends. Don't give it to him, Harry. Harry couldn't even register the hush from Bellatrix, he had already decided. He knew that, and so did the Malfoy Sr. Harry handed over the orb. Toshiro appeared over the afternoon light of London in soul form, Hiranmaru disguised in his ring form, invisible to all after a short incant of a spell. Decked out entirely in black, to his hooded cloak that shrouded his white hair and teal orbs from his combat boots, the captain glared sternly, overlooking the city. Bane was to return Umbridge by nightfall, alive, not unscathed, and Snape had sent word to the Order to assist Potter and the DA after he had left the former headmistress with the captain as Malfoy was holding the fort in Hogwarts with Snape and McGonagall. Everything appeared to have the potential to turn out well. But Toshiro's expression remained unchanged. It was silent, detached and solemn. The sunlight caught the golden chain interwoven in the captain's hand, twirling slowly as Toshiro held it before his eyes, dulled with resignation. Slowly, the golden grains of time trickled down from one bulb to the other, the thin neck allowing passage. Only several tens of the grains remained. One by one, they fell as the captain watched, unable to do anything else but smile sadly. He was a Shinigami. But not even he could delay the inevitable. 40, 39, 38, 37, 36. Get away from my godson. 34. The prophecy shattered as Lucius dove for it in vain. 31. Now, listen to me. I want you to take the others and get out of here. What? Exclamation mark. No. I'm staying with you. You've done beautifully. Now, let me take it from here. 21. Hermione gasped from the bottom of the mound, Ron and the other children by her side, watching the battle take place. 20. Bellatrix cackled gleefully as she wrestled with her younger sister, bloodlust overwhelming her frame. She must kill someone for her lord. Now. 18. Moody and Shacklebolt countered their respective Death Eaters, shielding themselves from counters as they waved their wands in silence or in Moody's case, grunts. 15. Expelliarmus. Harry knocked aside Lucius Cane, leaving him stunned with wand in hand. 12. Nice one, James. 10. Lucius' wand flies out of his hands. 7. Bellatrix frowns as her brother-in-law, one she actually approved of, was knocked aside. Her cousin. She glanced at Potter. He'll do. 4. Avada Kedavra. 1. From the heavens, the ice captain nodded to his subordinate, shrouded in a cloak similar to his own. It was time. Sirius Black groaned as the green magic hit him dead on the chest, barely registering the world blacking out on him. The ground under his feet swept from him and him falling towards it with alarming swiftness. Placing a shaky hand to the ground, the former fugitive pulled himself up, standing but disorientated like someone had given him a very well-aimed concussion, figuring that perhaps a stun had hit him instead of his deranged cousin's curse. He would have been dead if he was. Blinking away the darkness that marred his sight, 3 figures blurred in and out. One was lying on the floor, unmoving, some a number of yards away as another was hugged from behind by the last. Black knew the sight all too well. Damn. Someone was killed today, the fugitive thought grimly as he ran a hand through his ebony locks. Remus? Moody? Kingsley? Tonks? Might as well survey to whom, since he would most likely break the news to the others. Walking over, Black nearly fell to the earth once more. It was him. His skin was pale, too pale to be alive. Eyes lidded, his body was splayed awkwardly, having fallen over in literal dead weight, head lolled and hands limp against the granite. Lips pursed in a small gasp, his ebony hair danced in the soft light from above. Sirius barely registered much of anything other than the shock that he was dead when a heart-wrenching cry made him wish he had the physical capability to hold his godson once more. Harry, was held against his will to near his body, Remus holding him in an iron grip as much as his godson was struggling. Pain and pure anguish colored his green eyes. There was such horror and grief in those eyes. That he was so similar to James that Black looked away, his eyes filled with tears as he brushed a hand over them sardonically. So, the dead can cry as well. Sirius Black? Quote. The now dead wizard turned to find a young woman standing behind him, mindlessly thinking later on why in the hell he followed her in hindsight, considering no one else saw her. She was dressed in a black set of robes similar to Hitsugaya, only without his white garment but in an ebony cloak that shrouded her face, a red katana at her hip. Her face was indifferent but kind, kneeling beside him to reveal kind brown eyes and a soft brown hair clipped into a bun. You have to come with me, sir. Your time as the living has come to close and can only move on from here. Holding out a hand, the woman stood. Black followed numbly, turning back to see his godson look to the corridor leading out of the Department of Mysteries, where his cousin had escaped. Black knew those eyes all too well. Revenge. Vengeance. And with a turn, the soul followed the Shinigami, tears that threatened to fall, glistening his cheeks. Harry was alone. And he, too, like James and Lily, had left him. All alone. Harry could not think straight, pure adrenaline in his blood as he pointed his wand over a cowering Bellatrix, the words on his lips. Breaths short and sharp, Harry ignored the sting of pain from small cuts that littered his hairline and face, numb to everything but the fact that his godfather was dead. The only family he had left was gone. All because of her. Red threatened to mar the 16-year-old's eyes. Soft whimpers echoed in the main lobby of the ministry when a whisper resonated. Harry wasn't sure if it was in his head or it was for all to hear. Frankly, he really didn't care. "You've got to mean it, Harry." The voice whispered, sensible and calm. "She killed him. She deserves it." The Death Eater rose an eyebrow as she noted hesitation. The boy was not attacking. Harry's hand twitched, wand unsteady. "You know the spell, Harry." Everyone did. The Death Eater had just exercised on how to use it on his own godfather. With a soft plume of black, a presence appeared behind Harry, Bellatrix grinning. Her lord had arrived. Her mad cackling was back. "Do it," Voldemort ordered upon a stiff Harry. The Dark Lord was pale white, his form skeletally thin as dark scarlet eyes glared through slits. Bald and free of lips, his face resembled of a skull and snake-like openings for a nose. His thin bony hands gripped a U-wand, disfigured to appear like an incorrectly healed bone as ebony robes covered the rest of his person. Turning to see the person who killed his parents, Harry found himself remembering who was truly whom he was supposed to be pointing his wand at. Following through, Harry allowed the words to bypass his lips, only to have his wand thrown aside by the Dark Lord, who scoffed in disgust. So weak. But it was at that moment when in a burst of flames appeared Dumbledore, eyes dark and twinkled with disappointment as he spoke with a tone of which he was speaking to a disobedient student. "It was foolish of you to come here tonight, Tom. The Aurors are on their way. By which time I shall be gone. And you," Voldemort waved a hand to the floor, "shall be dead." Pushing Harry aside out of harm's way and Bellatrix having made her escape via flow, Dumbledore's wand emitted a ruby light in unison with Voldemort's acidic green, clashing violently with cracks of electricity to each as Harry watched blankly, eyes registering the sight numbly. With a growl, Voldemort sent the stray bolts of lightning towards Harry, who allowed several to destroy the blocks surrounding him, until he finally realized that he was being attacked, curling into himself. When suddenly the cracks stopped, a small shadow in front of him. Looking up, Harry found a familiar form of a Toshiro Hitsugaya, scowling under a hood as he deflected the lightning with his wand. "Stay down, Potter," Toshiro ordered, as Harry obeyed. The Ice Captain turned back to the duel between Dumbledore and Voldemort before cursing, the Dark Lord summoning a serpent of fire from a breath of flame. Towering in several heights of Grop, the serpent roared in flames, licking in the increased temperature as the captain summoned a shield of ice to protect Harry, shunpoing to Dumbledore, who blinked in surprise at his appearance before nodding. Batting aside the serpent with a wave of his wand, the headmaster redirected the flames at the Dark Lord, Toshiro dragging Harry behind him, deciding the boy was more useful beside him. Summoning waters from the lobby fountain, the headmaster wrapped the Dark Lord into a watery prison, swirling them violently as the flames died away. Shunpoing swiftly, Toshiro appeared in midair over the water prison containing the Dark Lord, before stabbing his wand into the water, freezing everything as the very air seemed to condense. Lifting his wand, the captain narrowed his hidden eyes as cracks decorated the sphere of ice. Shunpoing back to Harry, the captain nodded to Dumbledore just when Voldemort emerged from the ice with a bellow of anger. Sending a blast of black smoke, the Dark Lord sneered at the headmaster's swift counter, a light blue shield and Toshiro's white one, covering him, and Harry, who was held protectively in the scruff of the neck, somewhere along the lines, had recovered his own wand. With a shout, Voldemort rippled his dark magic, making Harry cower as Dumbledore and Toshiro were pushed back, the captain unable to release his Ryotsu in which close proximity to the living. With a shatter, the glass windows of the surrounding offices became shards of jagged peril, as to the headmaster's horror, directed toward the three of them. Toshiro cursed as he conjured a dome of ice over him and Harry after a moment of disorientation, receiving a number of glass shards latch on his form as Harry remained relatively unscathed. Ignoring the pain, Toshiro watched as Dumbledore reduced the shards into sand with a white shield, passing harmlessly over the two of them. Breaking aside the dome, Toshiro ignored Harry's concerned look and glared at Voldemort, whose gaze narrowed over the captain before turning to Harry. And with a swirl of sand, the Dark Lord disappeared. "He is not gone, Master," Sephiroth warned as the captain readied his wand. "His presence is still here. Voldemort is an adept Legilimens." The ice captain realized as he turned back to Harry, who had begun to contort, falling to his knees as Dumbledore following Hitsugaya's thoughts as he knelt by the boy. Harry struggled on the sand-covered floor as he glared at Dumbledore, eyes a luminous green and shadows curled over the orbs as he spoke, voice rasp and hissing. "You've lost, old man." With a cry of pain, Harry contorted further as grunts began to escape, Toshiro studying him carefully as Dumbledore watched in a mixture of sadness and concern, the captain blankly aware of the nearing presence of the rest of the Order and DA. "Harry," the headmaster spoke softly, comforting and warmly concerned. But Potter was having an internal battle as words from the Dark Lord whispered with laced suffering. "So weak. So vulnerable. Look at me." Voldemort was playing with him. "Harry, it isn't how you are alike," Dumbledore whispered. "It's how you are not." More cries and grunted screams echoed as the transfer watched, indifferent. "Harry?" Quote. Eyes dull and unseeing, the boy appeared to relax a bit before contorting once more, the others arriving to the scene but not daring to near. A light grew his normally green eyes as the shadows faded slightly, as memories assaulted the boy who lived. His friends, his parents, everyone who loved him, Ron, Hermione, Sirius. "Do not make the same mistakes as I have and push others aside. Because in the end, you end up being the weakest one, with no one by your side." The green eyes met hidden icy teal under the captain's hood, indifferent yet colored with a hint of approval. Confidence swirled in Harry as he mustered every ounce of his magic to one task, to speak. "Why, you're the weak one." It was his voice. "And you'll never know love or friendship," Harry managed to mutter, his face hot on the sand-covered tile, cold to the touch. And I feel sorry for you." And all at once, the pain receded in a jolt of fury as Harry let out another yell, rolling on his back as ebony wisps escaped from his chest, suspending the Dark Lord above the boy who breathed heavily in a frozen miniature cyclone of sand. "You are a fool, Harry Potter," Voldemort spoke softly, berating. "And you will lose everything." "Will he or will that be you, Riddle?" Quote. Turning, Voldemort found himself facing the ice captain, blood trickling down his chin, only a ghost of an amused smirk on his face visible to the Dark Lord as his voice fell to a whisper that only the Dark Lord and the captain could hear. "Death cannot be escaped, Tom Marvolo Riddle. Because death will be there to claim either your soul, no matter how mangled it becomes, or the young boy you curse. In either case, I have no preference. Death will come." The Dark Lord looked at the transfer with an expression that was rare. "Fear." Hitsugaya laughed breathily. "The Aurors have arrived, Half-Blood." And true to the captain's words, with a burst of green flames, armed wizards and witches arrived to the scene, with Fudge at the forefront as Voldemort caught sight of them, before turning back to Hitsugaya, who smirked darkly, blood freezing into crimson snowflakes. "Run as far as you can, Riddle. And await my judgment of your fate." In a swirl of sand, the Dark Lord disappeared, leaving Fudge to crumple to the floor, a wide look on his face. He's back. Chapter 17. Aftermaths. "You encountered this Voldemort, Hitsugaya Taicho," the head captain more so stated than questioned, as the ice captain is knelt before him. The older Shinigami studied the young captain for a moment. His form was, in a word, tired. The head captain imagined it so, Running the division was already a job within itself. Adding Hogwarts and the Order of the Phoenix, the child appeared to uptake too many things at once. But the young captain's pride and the steeled cold of which the young captain vehemently refused to allow his colleagues to even invest in the notion that he was inapt for his position, silenced the head captain from voicing anything. "Yes, head captain." Hitsugaya nodded, his form small but commanding. Hana Taicho had saw to it that the youngest captain's wounds were addressed when he returned, bloodied from glass shards as the 9th seed of the 10th division had reported, before anything else, glaring anyone who dared to challenge her words. The 4th division healer had won indefinitely, none daring to invoke her ire. The sole bandage at his cheek along with many others hid from his sight as the white-haired captain bowed, giving his report. Riddle's Ryotsu was more distorted than his Horcruxes, as expected. The moment he is killed, hollowification will overtake him. And in the basis of how dark it is, the hollow is at least that of an Arankar. Are you suggesting that it may be the level of an Espada, Hitsugaya Taicho? Quote. Not to that extent, sir. But enough to be held in caution. And of this Sirius Black? Quote. He has been allowed entry to Soul Society and has been cleared of his past by the Lethe, as you have pardoned, head captain. You are to proceed with the next phase, Hitsugaya Taicho. Yes, head captain. The aged Shinigami nodded, determining the meeting over as the ice captain bowed, before shunpoing out, taking his leave. The head captain folded his hands over his cane in silence. As beings and gods of death, they were the intermediate of the world of the living and Soul Society. They were protectors of the living and dead alike, and as powerful as they were, the predetermination of death was something that they could only watch. Rarely was it the case that they were able to interfere, Voldemort, unless the situation called for it. Sirius Black was not. The ice captain had interfered once. Instead of being consumed by a Dementor, he was liberated for a year. But then came the fate of being killed by his cousin. The dead could only interfere so much if at all in this case. At least now, the boy had a body to bury. It was better than most Shinigami could have said before their drink of the Lethe. But it was not like they knew any better anyway. Toshiro returned to Hogwarts the next day, bandage-free, the head captain wanting all of his captains present for the meeting in a physical sense for the first time in months. It was only 2 weeks left until the end of the school year, so truly there really wasn't any reason for the ice captain's required attendance. However, Toshiro voiced no protest. If he were to choose between Soul Society and Hogwarts, the answer was obvious. The grounds were quiet as the captain walked down the hall, when a soft voice called out to him, silent and elegant to the ear. Toshiro obliged, turning to meet the head ghosts of Hogwarts, the Grey Lady speaking for them all. Mr. Hitsugaya. The Dark Lord has returned. You speak of it like you were not informed of it in earlier fashion, Toshiro replied coolly. My role this year was merely overlooking the search of Horcruxes. The official return of Voldemort was expected. And the response of Soul Society? Nearly headless Nick inquired, his cheerful expression serious for once. What is the decision of the head captain and the Central 46? Quote. That is classified. Hitsugaya snapped as he flipped open his soul phone before reading its contents, closing it once more. But as I informed you in beginning of my arrival, I am here in investigative purposes and observation. Involvement upon my part and therefore, Soul Society, is minimal and contained to a limit. And anything or anyone in the way, will be dealt with in accordance. That is all. The ghosts of Hufflepuff and Gryffindor appeared furious as Ravenclaw and Slytherin remained unmoved, expressions thoughtful as Toshiro blinked slowly, teal gaze half-lidded. Just before the fat friar was going to say something, the Grey Lady interrupted her expression scrutinizing. To what extent is your investigation, Mr. Hitsugaya? Quote. Hitsugaya sported a small smirk at the question, as the Bloody Baron grinned maliciously at the words as the Grey Lady's eyes gleamed with a hint of amusement. The extent of which my superior orders me to. I am in no control of which how dependent his orders are as my superior. And therefore the extent of which his investigation is dependent upon. Oh. The friar was catching on as a pointed look colored his expression. The nearly headless ghost of Gryffindor turned his nearly decapitated head in confusion at his colleagues and the captain, the only one out of the loop. Clever, Hitsugaya. The Baron praised as he scoffed at the captain's ingenuity. Informing your superior or not, to control the orders you were given. Brilliant. Toshiro shrugged indifferently as he turned to the Gryffindor dormitory. It is merely asking the correct questions. Agreeing solemnly, the house ghosts made for their respective exits when Nick scratched his head with a frown. I don't get it. The Baron muttered a litany of unsavory curses that elicited an argument with the oblivious Nicholas as the Grey Lady sighed as if this was not her first time explaining something to a particularly slow child as the friar patted her back sympathetically. All in a typical day in a gathering of the four of them. Perched on the windowsill above the ghosts, the captain smirked softly, amused as his thoughts traveled to the events that have transpired. Slowly, the smirk was replaced with a grim frown. Hiranmaru and Sephiroth roused as their master appeared in the inner world, the wintry wasteland graced with a soft snowfall. Seating himself in the ice, Toshiro glared into the purple mountains in the distance. Voldemort now knows that the Heavenly Guardian exists. He will want to anything in his power to make sure that I choose to allow him to live. And now that Lucius Malfoy has been captured, Draco and his mother have become perfect pawns to play. Draco and his mother? Sephiroth echoed as Hiranmaru nodded. And knowing the nature of the Malfoys, they may be swayed, but that is only if all three of them are no longer under the threat of the Dark Lord or Azkaban alike. Hiranmaru revealed. With his father in Azkaban without any hope of escape other than means of the Dark Lord, Draco is the perfect pawn to exploit with his mother as leverage and vice versa if he fails in the Dark Lord's orders, to which he has no choice but to comply if he wishes to free his father and allow his mother to live. What a predicament you have presented me with, Draco. The master mused with a hint of annoyance. Dumbledore has presented with his intention to make Snape as Voldemort's spy within Hogwarts and to ensure that he is trusted to kill the headmaster. But such a roundabout way of killing Riddle is unnecessary. Urahara has finished the method to separate the fragment? Hiranmaru questioned as their master nodded. Yes, but minor consequences to Potter. But nonetheless fulfills the necessary objective. The problem remains in what is the remaining number of Horcruxes before I am able to finally kill Riddle. Dumbledore informed me that it cannot be more than 7, but uncertainty is not allowed. Toshiro frowned darkly, his glare intensifying as the snowfall grew into a fierce blizzard. And I am not naive enough to believe that Dumbledore will allow a student to willingly go about and do as he pleases in such a time after Black's death. Then what are you suggesting we do, Master? Sephiroth rose a brow. Do what you do when you do not know or in the dark of something, of course. Their master smirked finally as the blizzard whistled in the inner world. Find out for yourself, with the help of several allies. An hour later, Toshiro was seated in an empty classroom, lounging comfortably on a desk, his back against a wall with an ebony hardcover when a soft knock took him from his reading, to reveal a solemn Draco. Unlike his friend, Draco appeared tired, his blonde locks limp against his pale face, yet his eyes sparkled with a hint of relief at the sight of the captain. Toshiro. Draco sighed as he felt the door lock behind him, accustomed to the captain's security measures, as he leaned back against the wood in a tired sag. Thank Merlin, you are all right. After Potter came back with Dumbledore without you with news that your grandfather had sent for you to return, I had thought that you were wounded or otherwise. Ah. You have friends who truly do care for you, Master. Hiranmaru teased with a laugh as Sephiroth failed to stifle a chuckle. I feel so proud of you. Shut up. Toshiro retorted annoyedly as he turned his attention at the blonde. No. My grandfather simply wished to have me report to him personally. I apologize for being unable to do anything about your father, Draco. Toshiro glanced with slight concern at the blonde's flinch at the mention of his father as the latter shook his head with a sad breath. Orders arrived soon after your father and the Dark Lord's followers had. Father has chosen his fate and you bear none of the responsibility, Toshiro. If anything, I would have preferred that you didn't do anything at the risk that you would too be caught up in this mess. Malfoy admitted silently, before running a hand through his messy blonde locks, eyes determined. But now that my father is in Azkaban, the Dark Lord will not be pleased with his capture along with the other recently released Death Eaters, Aunt Bella for one. It's kinda ironic if you think about it. Sephiroth added at a nod to the blonde's words. You'd think after being in Azkaban it would make them go to hiding. There's a reason we have execution or exile more often than imprisonment. Too much work to lock people up unless absolutely necessary, just cut off the head and something is bound to stop. Hiranmaru shrugged as Toshiro ignored them. Not to mention your impending promotion. The captain stated the obvious as they seated themselves in the class, Toshiro on the desktop of the seat in front of the one that Draco had taken to, the former crossing his arms as the latter frowned. Will it be that soon? Quote. Yes, and for two reasons. Firstly, your father has failed in his task to retrieve the prophecy that Voldemort wanted and will most likely exploit to allow that reason enough to pressure you and your mother into doing anything to spare you now that your father is now in Azkaban, has only one way to escape, by Voldemort's power. Secondly, you are in the perfect position for Voldemort to find information on a new adversary or ally for him to explore, along with studying Potter for information in the aftermath of Black's death. An adversary or ally? Who, in the world could be either of those at this? The blonde rose a brow as the captain stared back, unblinking before the gray steel orbs narrowed. What did you do, Toshiro? Quote. Damn. Toshiro cursed as he silenced the ice dragon's amusement in his mind. Why on earth would you think that I would be responsible for such a thing? Quote. Draco knew his friend well enough to detect the sarcasm in the indifferent tone of the captain as he glared at him. At least tell me that you did not straight up tell him that you would be the one to kill him or anything of the sort, Toshiro. I was disguised and did not explicit state who I was, if that is what you are implying, Draco. Surely, you do not think I am that foolish? Quote. No. But you did have a plan when you did that, didn't you? Quote. The captain blinked once before the blonde groaned at the confirmation. You have been with those Gryffindors for too bloody long, Toshiro. I think their recklessness has rubbed off on you. You are diseased with a severe illness, my friend. I do not know the cure for such malady. As if you were one to talk, Toshiro retorted with a scoff. Do not think I am ignorant of your ventures to improve your legilimens and occlumency when you think I am not paying attention. Despite after I told you that if you accidentally do to venture into my mind, I can permanently break yours. Do not lecture me about being reckless. Besides, my improvisation is not subpar. My actions pales in comparison of your proposal of introducing yourself to the Dark Lord with a notion to play games. And I know firsthand how lethal your improvising can be. Malfoy shot back before eyeing his friend with a hint of mock skepticism. Are you sure you are a prodigy, Hitsugaya? Quote. Just as sure as you are of my house, Malfoy, the captain smirked back. The blonde laughed lightly, as if they were sharing an inside joke before they met gazes. What will we do now then, my friend? Now that you have somewhat revealed yourself to the Dark Lord with your identification as the Heavenly Guardian, and with my inevitable promotion into being a Death Eater, what now? Quote. I thought it would be obvious, Malfoy. Toshiro replied curtly as he jumped off the desk, landing with the grace of an acrobat. We continue with the plan, as it will all come to a head in a year. Oh. Malfoy echoed, trailing after his friend as he smiled with mirth. You have planned it up until the following year already, Hitsugaya. Quote. Were you expecting otherwise? Quote. Then, where in the world are we off to this time? Quote. Why, I believe you are rather familiar with your own home, no? Quote. In Dumbledore's office, newly refurnished to his tastes once more after the imprisonment of Umbridge to Azkaban and the former headmaster reinstated, seated a confused Harry Potter before the said headmaster, who spoke to his student with a solemn tone. I know how you feel, Harry. No, you don't, the Gryffindor retorted blatantly, not disrespectful per se but stating it as if it was as is. Looking to his fidgeting hands, the boy who lived whispered after a silence. It's my fault. No, the fault is mine. Dumbledore shook his head. I knew it was only a matter of time before Voldemort made the connection between you. I thought by distancing myself from you, as I have done all year, he'd be less tempted, and therefore you might be more protected. The prophecy said, neither one can live while the other one survives. It means one of us is gonna have to kill each other, in the end. Harry's voice shook, trailing as the headmaster looked at the boy almost pityingly. No, Dumbledore admitted. The lost prophecy was first told to me by Professor Trelawney. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, and with his power, prove his worth. Either must die at the hand of the Heavenly Guardian, for neither can live while the other survives. The one who is heralded as the Heavenly Guardian descends upon the earth, cold and merciless as death surrounds him as he watches over the Dark Lord and the one who shall vanquish him. To the very end, only he shall be the one who will determine whom shall be reaped, and with his decision, the Dark Lord shall reign the 3 worlds, or shall raise in the depths of history. This Heavenly Guardian, then will be the one who. Harry whispered as he tried to collect his thoughts. Do you know who this Heavenly Guardian is, Professor? Quote. Yes. He, too, carries a burden upon his shoulders, Harry. Having the power to decide the death of you and the Dark Lord comes with no small price. Why didn't you tell me? Quote. For the same reason you had tried to save Sirius. Dumbledore replied, his twinkling eyes dim. The same reason your friends saved you. After all these years, after all you've suffered, I didn't want to cause you any more pain. I cared too much about you. Silence lapsed the conversation until Harry excused himself, too many thoughts swirling to even do anything more than numbingly pack his things for the end of the school year as he left the office. Sighing in the silence, the headmaster found that he found other visitors, Hitsugaya who was accompanied by Snape and McGonagall. Mr. Hitsugaya. Headmaster. Judging from the expression of Potter in his retreat to the dormitory, I suppose you have informed him of the prophecy. The fact that the captain was in his full uniform did not slip unnoticed as Dumbledore nodded with a sad sigh, the captain continuing. My grandfather believes your plan is flawed and too risky, Headmaster. Sending Snape as your spy after ensuring his loyalty by your death is unnecessary. Dumbledore smiled cynically as Snape stiffened. Albus. McGonagall paled at the captain's words as the latter glared back at Dumbledore's uncharacteristically cold look, despite his smile. What is Mr. Hitsugaya speaking of? Severus is the Dark Lord's servant after your death. Quote. I apologize for dragging you into such morbid conversations, Professor McGonagall, but it is true. But I have no intention in allowing you to perish in such an idiotic reason. If played correctly, only one life will needed to fix the problem that plagues the Western wizarding realm. Toshiro glared as everyone before him looked ready to protest before the captain rose a hand. My grandfather's orders are absolute and he has decided. There is nothing you can say or protest that will counter the weight of his words. Surely, you are not suggesting what I am thinking, Mr. Hitsugaya! Exclamation mark. McGonagall all but yelled, her voice horrified. You were but a child. Barely in the order and after the death of Sirius Black, we cannot allow you to recklessly. Quote. No, you wouldn't, Toshiro replied coldly, cutting off the head of Gryffindor, annoyed. Allow me to then remind you, Professor. I am not under anyone's permission but my grandfather's. A part of the order I am, but I do not take orders from any of you. If you do, however, try to stop me, then by all means, you may try. With a small shrug, the captain met the glare from McGonagall for impudence, the thoughtful look from Dumbledore and the almost lost expression of Snape evenly. Recall the position of our former defense against the dark arts professor and headmistress currently. I was feeling a bit merciful in my decision to send her to Azkaban, although my grandfather had asked if I wanted to do the same to Fudge. Snape rose a brow at the only student. As in the Minister of Magic. Quote. Yes, Professor. Toshiro nodded as if he were conversing of the weather. The minister and my fellow colleagues did not see eye to eye, if you will, and after small meeting with several methods of persuasion, he was compliant enough to our conditions. Silence lapsed as the headmaster broke it in a whisper, his eyes glinting with a hint of sadness, hope, and sympathy. You are aware of exactly why I had suggested this plan to Severus in the first place, are you not, Mr. Hitsugaya? Quote. The captain nodded as the headmaster sighed. Then you should know that I cannot allow you to do this. And with a flick of his wrist, the headmaster fired a stun, the ruby magic crackling toward the captain at lightning speed. But the captain was faster. With a soft incant of Bakudo, an orange box protected the captain from the stun, clashing with the demon magic as the captain allowed them to cancel one another before he pulled out his own wand. On the contrary, you are in no position to be allowing me in doing anything. Toshiro snapped as a golden locket gleamed over the captain's neck, revealed after the small scuffle as Snape and Dumbledore's eyes widened at the sight of it. I have done in 3 Horcruxes, and with the diary of Tom Marvolo riddle destroyed, there remains but one, other than Potter. None but I can decide their fate. Therefore you, Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, never really had any position in this other than taking care of Potter as an animal for my slaughter. Nonetheless, to state whether you can allow me to do much of anything. I am the Heavenly Guardian, who holds the choice of destroying your hope in the form of an adolescent boy or doing away with the annoyance of a petulant lord that calls himself Voldemort in an act of fear. Do not tempt me to choosing wrongly. I will be returning to Japan after the Hogwarts Express arrives at London, Headmaster. Regardless of what you want to do, you know how to contact me. Before the captain could apparate, the headmaster spoke his words, soft. Are you aware of what this implies for you, Mr. Hitsugaya? Quote. I am, Toshiro replied evenly. How long until you believe it will be time? Quote. The captain was silent before he whispered, shunpoing as his words seemed to echo in the office. In less than a year's time, Headmaster. Rangaku. The vice captain paused in mid-instruction as she turned away from the subordinates that she was supervising, assisting them in their training. Excusing herself with a lazy cat grin as she sent the mental message that she was not alone, the lieutenant was able to slip away at the head of courtyard of the division. A hand reached for the mirror that she kept on her person. On the what should have been her reflection, instead gleamed the scowling face of her captain, his usual stoic expression pulled to an annoyed frown that Matsumoto knew all too well from her escapades. Only this time, it was most definitely not her fault. Secure your location with the appropriate measures, Matsumoto. Then I will relay to you the circumstances. Her captain ordered promptly as she nodded, her eyes curious as she set up several barriers when she entered their shared office. Glancing at the lowered mirror, she observed her superior, noting silently that he was skinnier. Dressed in a white sleeveless turtleneck over tattered ebony jeans that were packed by yours truly with several silver belts over his hips, the captain nodded when she finished, satisfied. What I am going to tell you is under the same rules that I have designated for the time turner, Matsumoto. Only you and I are aware of this, do you understand? Her captain then informed her of the prophecy in regards of the heavenly guardian, Harry Potter, and Voldemort. This Voldemort split his soul into fragments to cheat death. The lieutenant snorted, her opinion of the Dark Lord clear as a haunted look glared through her silvery blue eyes. There are worse things in any of the worlds we cross that are worse than death. We would know, Matsumoto. Her captain deadpanned blandly as she chuckled, spotting the amused glint in his teal eyes. But that aside, I am the heavenly guardian, in the prophecy due to being Sephiroth's master and wielder. And will be the one who chooses which of the two, Voldemort or Harry Potter, will live. Is there something that bothers you about this, Taicho? Her voice was even, calm and collected. But a thin waver in her tone echoed to an event years ago. They were conversing of potential treason after all. Soul Society was not known for its forgiving nature. I will not let our division and you go through another defection on my behalf similar to the Diamond Dust Rebellion, Matsumoto. Hitsugaya reassured as he continued with an even glare that requested her to obey indefinitely. Just remember why this mirror exists and that if the circumstance arises that you must incapacitate me or at least, try to. This is an order, Matsumoto. Taicho. Quote. Do not make me repeat myself, Matsumoto. He cut in. I am not saying that this will happen, but under the precaution that I am unable to make the correct decision for Soul Society, you must do the appropriate duty to assure that the three worlds will be safe. My shields in occlumency are powerful along with my influence in legilimency with the assistance of Hyrule and Sephiroth. So, this is nothing more than a fail-safe for us. But in the circumstance that I am separated from them and they are unable, you need a fallback to rely on. But you would not be giving me this order if you did not believe the chances of it to happen were not significant, Taicho. You're too careful to not allow the thought. She finished, a small snort coloring her lips. Her lip gloss felt dry, too sticky for comfort. There's a reason why you talked to me through this instead of calling, isn't there, Taicho? Quote. Her captain merely stared but she caught the glimmer of surprise in those cold eyes. She smiled weakly as she pointed to the mirror that connected their conversation. Heineka hasn't said a thing to our conversation and yet I have not felt her panic that our connection has been severed, and neither has Hyrule and Sephiroth reacted at your request. No Zanpakuto would be settled with their master requesting to die, Taicho. This is only between us, isn't it? Quote. Yes, Matsumoto. Hitsugaya sighed, relenting before his glare hardened. The only parties aware of this arrangement are you and the head captain, him less extensively than you. If Voldemort truly fears death enough to sever his soul into fragments, and if the life of a Hogwarts student being the only thing in his way to reign and immortality is almost all too tempting of an endeavor to not take on. Silvery blue moon narrowed as the gears of the lieutenant's mind turned. Taicho. He nodded. Remember your orders, Matsumoto. Chapter 18. No more games. With Slytherin winning the House Cup, the school year had come to a close, which declared it to be time for the students to leave Hogwarts for the summer. Packing like the others within his dormitory, Harry sighed once more as a wave of grief hit him. Sirius was to be buried with his parents, beside those who entrusted their beloved son with, his friends. Almost automatically, Harry found himself finished with his packing, everything folded and neatly arranged for once, as if to indicate further that he was not okay. Glassy green eyes screened through his section of the dorm, looking but not truly seeing when a glint of silver caught the boy who lived's eye. The two-way mirror his godfather had gifted him, a thin shard left after the Battle of the Department of Mysteries. You will not see anything, young Harry. A kind voice stated, not condescending or pityingly as the boy found nearly headless Nick drift over to him, joining him at the bed. When had he come to the bed? Sirius is no longer of this world and the two-way mirror can only do so much, my boy. Harry gripped the shard, not responding before he looked at the ghost, who shook his head at the boy's question. Sirius is not the kind of wizard who would do that. to condemn you to see him like you see me. He has moved on and is content, do not disservice him by doing this. Why are you here, Sir Nick? Harry asked, his voice flat. I am the ghost of Gryffindor. You and the rest of your house are therefore my responsibility as much as it is Minerva's, and I believe you are the one who needs my help more than anyone right now, Harry. The ghost smiled sadly as he placed a transparent hand over the boy, careful to not phase through. You are still not alone, Harry. There are people who still love and cherish you just as much Sirius has and would have. It was several moments before Harry began to sob softly, whispered words of comfort echoing in his ears as the ghost consoled him the best he could. Seated outside the door that led to their shared wing of the dorm was a silent Hitsugaya, his eyes tired with his wand held loosely over a bent knee, his other leg outstretched, overhearing everything. Master, you are not finished. SapphireMoons prodded gently as the captain sighed, nodding despite none being able to see. After placing a few spells to assure privacy for Potter that would fade after half an hour, Toshiro departed, his trunk and belongings trailing behind him as he made his way towards Slytherin. Hitsugaya. Snape greeted, his face stoic. You are late. Forgive my tardiness, Professor. I was preoccupied with several things before coming here. Toshiro replied evenly before seating himself in the office, pouring himself a cup of tea. What is it that you wished to discuss at the end of the year, Professor? Quote. Dumbledore has thought over your proposal and has decided that if you insist to do what you wish, you are to do so while keeping at least him or myself informed of your actions as well as take to account your own self-preservation when doing so. The potion's master had the decency to look slightly annoyed and angered by the captain's indifference, having expected as much. Our conditions are that Potter is to be killed by the Dark Lord at the appropriate moment, by his hand so that the Horcrux can be lifted from him and protect him until then. As well as the request to have the plan of Dumbledore's concerning myself to be underway. Hitsugaya looked thoughtful for a moment before speaking. No. Holding up a hand before the potion's master can protest, the captain explained himself. The needed risk to make Voldemort kill Potter is not needed. As we speak, I have several individuals experimenting ways to remove the Horcrux from Potter while leaving his life intact that will be finished in 6 months to a year, Professor. Your condition will not be fulfilled if there is another way for me to remove the damned thing. I cannot promise that it will be painless, but I would imagine that it is better than dying by the hands of your parentage's murderer. Only now, I need Kuratsuchi and Urahara to finish their experiments to remove the Dark Lord parts from the Harry parts without hurting the latter. Too much. The ice captain finished, his tone annoyed. Although, Zaraki's suggestion is tempting. It would most certainly be easiest, Master. SapphireMoons admitted as Sephiroth finished the thought. But you are not one to opt for the easy way for anything. The boy deserves to live. However, under the condition of which this experiment cannot yield the wanted results that you wish for, Captain Hitsugaya. Until he doesn't. Toshiro commented as his dragons merely hummed. I will place your condition under consideration. Toshiro finished before his teal orbs glared. As you will with my conditions. The head of Slytherin remained silent, expecting as much. I am to be as thoroughly informed of the details in both fronts as in Voldemort's and the headmasters in consideration of the Death Eaters and the Order of the Phoenix. I have already undertaken consideration that you and the headmaster would still request to have in place the plan that two of you have thought up. I only wish to have several changes made. That would have been more sufficient if you had begun with more diplomatic wording, Hitsugaya. Snape snapped, frowning as the captain allowed a small smirk to tug his lips. It would have saved you and I some trouble with the headmaster. And miss the chaos that I have caused? The ice captain almost laughed. You have a sadistic streak, Master. Sephiroth stated plainly. Toshiro looked at the younger dragon with a deadpan, well aware of the amused gaze of SapphireMoons. You try to live in Soul Society for a century and have 12 other colleagues that have homicidal, psychopathic tendencies. Then you can talk to me about not having a hint of sadistic pleasure and causing chaos for your own entertainment. It's more than a hint, Toshiro. Hiranmaru smiled toothily. As amusing as it is to rile others, Hitsugaya, you are playing a dangerous game. A very dangerous one. Snape emphasized as the captain's blank face returned, eyes almost bored. When, since the rise of Voldemort, has the game been less than dangerous, Professor? The potion's master had no answer but only a rueful smile to signify that he agreed. Silence reigned small as Snape took to discussing with the captain of his OWLs, having taken all of them for his classes. Charms, transfiguration, herbology, defense against the dark arts, ancient runes, potions, care of magical creatures, astronomy, divination, arithmancy, history of magic, and muggle studies, in total being 12. A bit excessive, isn't it, Hitsugaya? Snape rose a brow. I've had worse. Toshiro shrugged noncommittally, his gaze aloof when a knock took them from their conversation, the professor glancing to the doors as Hitsugaya merely rose a brow at the Ryotsu on the other side of the door before shrugging as the professor bid entrance. With a groan of the hinges, the door swung open. Professor, are you preoccupied at the moment? I was wondering. Draco began when his gaze found another in the office, eliciting a smirk from the blonde who was accompanied by Pansy. What a surprise to find you here, Toshiro. Am I intruding? Quote. Not in the least. Professor Snape and I were merely speaking of the set of OWLs that I had undertaken this year. Hitsugaya returned in the exchange almost dully, making the potion's master give more than a second stare at the captain's lack of reprimand for using his given name. Meeting Draco's steel gaze as the blonde seated himself on the armchair adjacent and Pansy in another, Hitsugaya acknowledged the request as he stood, turning to their potion's professor. If that is all, I will now take my leave. Professor. Draco. Parkinson. And with the grace of a fluid dancer, the captain made his exit, leaving the three as they nodded in farewell. What can I do for you, Mr. Malfoy? Miss Parkinson? Quote. Are we alone and in private, Professor? Draco shot back as the potion's master rose a brow at the reply before speaking, his voice not cold but stern. Pansy gripped her dress almost nervously at the small silence. Hitsugaya's previous security measures are still in effect, and what you, Miss Parkinson, and I converse in this office will not leave the room and be shared with anyone with your or Miss Parkinson's explicit permission, Mr. Malfoy. Now, what is that I can help you with so late in the year? Quote. Malfoy was silent before he spoke. How to become a Death Eater. An hour later, Toshiro was slumped over, his eyes closed as he rested his back against the velvet lining of the compartment window in Hogwarts Express, taking all of them back to London, where he was to rendezvous with his father. The elder captain had assured that his lieutenant had done more than a page of her paperwork after he had spotted the stacks in his office. He had an inkling that the elder had sent Hinamori to set his subordinate straight, but nonetheless hummed a response. Loosening the thin, black tie at his collar, Toshiro had long ago removed his leather jacket, leaving him with an ebony vest over a teal shirt, untucked over a belt and tattered jeans that ended in laced boots. Hiranmaru strapped to his back once more, he did not bother to move when the compartment door opened, a tentative voice following it. Harry. Perhaps we can come back another time. Hitsugaya is, Hermione began before his teal eyes revealed themselves aware. Never mind. Potter. Granger. Weasley. To what do I owe this visit? The captain waved, indicating for them to seat themselves. Harry took the one across him, his dark circles evident and eyes red, while Granger and Weasley looked no better, slightly haggard. I wanted to thank you for protecting me a few days ago at the ministry and that this is overdue. Harry began, his voice a tad unsteady. I wasn't thinking straight after, he. It is unnecessary. Toshiro dismissed, arms crossed over his chest. I did not expect you to be rational after such an event. No one would be if they were faced in the same situation. Therefore, unwarranted. There is nothing you could have done to save him, Potter. His time came and you cannot do anything to change it. Hitsugaya is right, Harry. Hermione nodded as she placed a hand on his shoulder. There's nothing you could have done. But, if I hadn't dragged you guys with me to the ministry, then we wouldn't have gotten trapped with the order to save us, and then, maybe, Sirius wouldn't have. Tears threatened behind ebony-framed lens as Ron protested with a snap to his best friend. You didn't know, mate? None of us did. Hell, we didn't even know that Hitsugaya was scheming to arrest Umbridge before she arrived to Hogwarts. You thought Sirius was in trouble and was trying to save him like you were with my dad. You did everything you could, mate? Harry stared at his best friend, stunned as tears leaked anticlimactically. Hermione did the same with surprise marring her eyes, while Toshiro had his head notched ever so slightly to a side as if seeing a new angle of a test subject. How curious. Toshiro broke the stairs towards Ron as they all turned to him, the teal gaze locked on Ron. It appears that you were smarter than I had originally anticipated, Weasley. Sputtering at the insult, compliment as a rosy blush colored his face, Ron lifted a fist in the air. Oi! What is that supposed to mean? Exclamation mark. Quote. Before the captain could retort, a snort of laughter shook the frame of a Harry Potter and a Hermione Granger before they all befell into a heap of giggles after Ron's proclamation of having traitorous friends. Hitsugaya merely stared at them with a risen brow, as if trying to decide whether or not to scold them for rolling on the floor, but the mirth in his gaze prompted otherwise as a thin smirk ghosted his face. After several minutes, the three eventually regained their seats, the tension lax and gone as they spoke of small things before a question was voiced. Hitsugaya, what happened to Umbridge? Quote. What do you know? Toshiro replied back, removing his gaze from a blue handheld book. Ron shrugged. Only that the toad was sent to Azkaban and sacked, though no one knows why. Although it's not hard to guess. She used an unforgivable curse and committed the crimes of which you all are well aware. I merely fabricated them all together and presented it to a contact in Wizengamot in beginning of the year, sending her offenses as it accumulated. Therefore, she sent herself to Azkaban, Toshiro recounted, nonchalant. And seeing as she was going to Azkaban, her position of senior undersecretary and headmistress was revoked without a trial. She was denied a trial? Hermione squeaked, as they stared at the transfer. There is no need to ask questions that I know the answer to, was the ominous reply as the captain turned to Harry. Besides, you have more important tasks to take care of than Umbridge. Your prophecy is nearing, Potter. With bite, the three of them stiffened at the words. I shouldn't be surprised that you know, Harry said after a silence before looking at the captain. Did Dumbledore tell you? Quote. Only the part that concerned me. Wide eyes of Hermione Granger stared at the tired transfer student before her, his lips smirking at the succession of Potter and Weasley. As the wielder of the ivory wand. Then why Ron trailed off as Toshiro tilted his head. Yes, Weasley. The Heavenly Guardian. That decides is me. Gringotts Wizarding Bank is the only bank of the Western Wizarding world, manned by goblins that protected with a ferocity. A tall white marble building, columns imposing over the stone stairs that led to a set of bronze doors, guarded with a goblin in uniform. Through the door's bid entrance to the humble bank, a vast marble hall welcomed Toshiro as he entered, ebony counters that stretched from one end of the hall to the other, seated the goblins, quills scratching and golden-framed glasses twinkling in the chandelier-lit hall. Silence other than miscellaneous noise reigned supreme as the captain made his way to the sole counter at the center, his stare indifferent. Toshiro Hitsugaya. I would like to enter my vault for a withdrawal. The goblin looked up from his work, his beady black eyes narrowing on the captain as the latter glared right back. I would have to ask you to present your key, Mr. Hitsugaya. Friendly. Sephiroth noted as SapphireMoons hummed. I always preferred the company of Thestrals over goblins. Too greedy and always talking about the foolishness of wizards. At least they have the last part accurate. Toshiro huffed as he reached into his leather satchel. Until some major changes are made. Fishing out the small golden key, the captain was seated in a cart, sloping down the stone passageways, dimly lit under the light of torches. Driven by a goblin that had introduced himself as Gornook, Toshiro awaited until his guide had opened his vault before he made his move. Pulling out his wand out of his boot with a swift movement, Toshiro made a hook movement in midair pointed to the back of his guide. Petrificus Totalis. The whispered incantation echoed as the goblin widened his eyes, arms and legs snapped together in an instant. Stiff as a board of wood with his jaw that hid pointed teeth locked, the goblin could only glare darkly at his captor. Catching the goblin before he met the cavern floor, Toshiro glanced to the cart before entering his vault, bare from much of anything other than an organized chaos of muggle and wizarding money, stacked in ordered columns, along with a shelf adorned with 3 velvet boxes of the following colors: an emerald green, a golden yellow, and a royal purple. Set against the wall of the vault, Gornook could only wait as the young wizard disappeared from his field of vision, deeper into the vault. A soft jingle was heard before the white-haired child returned to his eyes, unchanged. Completely still, the goblin could only stare as the boy lifted his wand, the incantation on his lips muffled to his pointed ears. 6 minutes later, Hitsugaya was before the thief's downfall once more, the waterfall flowing innocently in the darkness, Gornook awaiting him at the cart with glassy eyes. This thing again. Toshiro huffed as he contemplated his options for a moment. You are on a timed schedule, master. SapphireMoons reminded as his master nodded, deciding that the limitations the thief's downfall were to be tested another day. Sidestepping the water, the white-haired transfer hovered to the deeper vaults of the bank, not sparing a glance at an occasional carcass. Pausing in his steps as he sensed the subject of his visit to Gringotts, the captain retreated into his inner world. Pyrrhus. As if summoned, the dragon materialized in the icy grounds, the ice under his boots hissing and crunching loudly as he spoke with a blood-red glare. Hitsugaya. I have been impatient, awaiting for you. Apologies, Pyrrhus. Toshiro replied coolly as SapphireMoons and Sephiroth materialized as well, their expressions as revealing as blank sheets of parchment. I could not allow you to have your freedom until it was proven to me that the information you had given was correct. The Horcrux was indeed in Bellatrix Lestrange's vault, and the fact that there were 7 of them in total have been most informative. The ruby-eyed dragon glared. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. Toshiro was silent, his own glare even and stern. We had an agreement, as you do not have loyalty to me and I to you. There is viable reason for either of us to disbelieve or trick the other if offered a better deal. You and I have not, therefore, I will go to your prison and free you, but do not resist my spells. They are all placed for a reason, and if you do, I assure you that my ice will be more powerful than your fire. Are we clear? Crystal. Pyrrhus growled before sending a pointed glare. And if you can, Hitsugaya, I prefer not to be shrunk. SapphireMoons and Sephiroth exchanged looks as Toshiro blinked. Why? How the hell do you think they were able to move me around to guard different vaults? Goblins may not be fond of wizards, but they are aware of how powerful they are as well as cruel. The fire dragon glanced at the captain. No offense. Other than you, I have yet to see a remotely decent wizard in my life. I am no wizard. Toshiro replied, his words cold. I am a Shinigami. Appearing in a shunpo as promised, the captain removed his satchel as he glanced at the fire dragon's stiffened flinch, reaching an arm into the seemingly impossible depths, Pyrrhus relaxing after being assured in the inner world that it was only the captain outside the inner world. After allowing the dragon to free himself by casting a spongify on the confines and allowing him to relish the feeling of being free in a while, the captain glanced at his wand before turning back to his bag. Placing 3 corked potions before him, Toshiro spoke internally, all 3 dragons hearing him. This will restore your health and your eyesight. Open your eyes and jaw, and swallow all of the potion. Do not open your eyes until I tell you to. Toshiro commanded as he mixed an orange potion with a deep red one before waving his wand over it, a hued fume dancing overhead as several words escaped his lips. Disgruntled, the dragon obeyed to reveal a mouth of ivory knives, teethed to tear whole cows and a milky white gaze that wielded only a hint of the former ruby. Resisting the urge to choke up the vile tasting potion that was poured down his throat, Pyrrhus forced himself to be still, cringing within the inner world under the watch of the ice dragons. Outside, Toshiro watched the dragon tonic and his version of the Oculus potion work its magic, the once dull and flaky scales now a bright metallic silver. The frail wings, now vibrantly spiked and the veins of the thin membranes strong, his mane of broken spikes, now piercing and steel needles that promised pain. Now, for the eyes. Open your eyes. Toshiro ordered, his voice stern. With a reluctant twitch, the eyelids folded back to reveal dark rubies, angrily vicious to shed blood. Glancing to the captain who smirked, a silver of mirth reflected back to the child. You are smaller than I had anticipated, Hitsugaya Taicho. Scowling immediately, the white-haired transfer glared annoyedly. Do you want to be free from here or not? Nodding his head, the dragon smirked but fell silent as the captain muttered something like, annoying dragons, under his breath. But nonetheless reached for the last potion, a murky brown in color and the bottleneck thin as it exited through a long, needle-like opening. Adding a premeditated volume of dragon tonic, the dragon version of the essence of Dittany was finished, Toshiro shaking it with a violent slosh before nearing Pyrrhus, who eyed the potion warily. I don't have to drink that, right? No. The captain replied as he held the bottle over the scarred flesh, not as ugly as it once was, but marring all the same. This will be applied to your scars and will rectify the impairment that they apply, however, the scars will not be gone. Allow them to be the reminder that as beautiful and alluring the heavens may be, do not allow them to fool you into arrogance that the cruelty which the heavens subject to those who fly under his reign to be an idle threat. The silver-gray dragon was silent before he observed the captain, who poured the potion onto his disfigured hide, new scales and skin regenerating in a rapid rate appearing faint but still prominent enough to be seen. Ignoring the green fumes that drifted over them when Hitsugaya had declared that he was finished, Pyrrhus made his decision internally as he met gazes with the captain with his newly restored vision. Now, what? The dragon questioned bluntly as Toshiro rose an eyebrow, expression amused. You tell me, Pyrrhus. You have freed yourself from the chains that beheld you and have miraculously been healed of your physical impairments. And you ask me, now, what? The ice captain gestured to the exit, out of the vaults. What else but for you to escape, causing as much destruction as you wish to those that have imprisoned you? The wicked smile of ivory daggers could cause anyone to shiver in fear. And of you? The Ukrainian Ironbelly asked, his glare inquisitive but playful. I cannot just allow the heir of the Yamamoto to be in crossfire, not to mention the ambassador to the east and the master of the elders that are watching me. They will have my hide if I as much as send an ember your way. Smirking lightly, the captain summoned a small bolt of white Kido, floating overhead. When this disappears, I will be out of the vicinity. I will await you at my palace, Pyrrhus. Before disappearing in a shunpo, the captain paused. Do not destroy my vault and the bank too much, if you can. I have important items within these caverns as well. Snorting at the quip, the healed dragon waved a dismissing claw despite his nodding expression. Which vault? Only 3 goblin deaths. Toshiro read the following morning, his hair flat for once as he hovered over the Daily Prophet. The dragon escape of Gringotts marring the front pages. The moving image of Pyrrhus demolishing the entrance hall and domed roof of the bank in the center. Dressed in a comfortable black hakama that was patterned with gold, the captain nursed a cup of ginseng and ginger tea, ignoring the slight burn in the back of throat, freshly out of the shower. I would have thought that you would cause much more chaos if allowed to rampage. A humanized Pyrrhus snorted, his body language lazy as he laid outspread on the futon. The dragon was transfigured into a humanoid, courtesy of the captain who rather did not care to have one of the largest dragons in his palace courtyards. Hiranmaru and Sephiroth smirked from within the inner world at the fire dragon's initial refusal at the idea, laughing amusedly after their master had asked the living dragon if he wished to be shrunk instead. Muttering curses, the dragon was compliant. I wanted freedom. Not the entire armies of wizards after me for destroying their only bank. Any more damage would be more of a pain for me in the long run, even with satisfaction in the forefront. Yes. Toshiro agreed as he set aside the newspaper, a slight twitch of his lips as he met the blink look. But you did not fail to assure that it was the goblins that tortured you the most met their ends by your jaws. And you know this how? Quote. Shinigami. The said death god shrugged, as he burned the newspaper in an incense urn. I am the being that sends recently deceased to their proper destinations, and as a captain, am able to peek, in a way, into the memories and actions of which the soul has committed prior to death. There's no privacy, is there? The blood-red gaze was resigned. That depends. The teal one was fixed on a set of paperwork. On whether or not you trust them. Quote. On whether or not they are a threat to my intentions, Toshiro corrected, his brush writing in neat rows. If I have deemed them not, then they are allowed as much as they please. I do not care about their story or the like to satisfy anything. But if the opposite, it is different, of course. Their story is important until they have been terminated. No more, no less. Then I suppose I am grateful to befall on the first category. The captain paused in his writing, neither of them meeting the other's eyes, one transfixed to the sky, the other to the earth. Finishing the page, the captain looked toward the transfigured dragon, his voice indifferent yet subtle. What will you do now, Pyrrhus? Now that your revenge is sated and the life of a prison is no longer, you are free to do as you please. Toshiro lifted his tea to his lips, the scent of ginger in the air. Or is it that you believe that you hold some kind of debt to repay me? Quote. I do not deny that I do not. The reply was short and to the point. Then I shall. You owe me nothing. I cannot. The words were absolute as the captain glared before sighing. Then consider it to be one that I will call upon when needed. Toshiro suggested as the dragon turned to him, his expression blank other than one risen, inquisitive brow. And once it has been called upon, consider it repaid. And if I cannot, Hitsugaya? The iron-bellied dragon questioned as the captain returned it with an even glare. How can you trust that I will honor this deal with you? You are giving up much and leave yourself vulnerable to stake upon odds against you. How can you simply allow it to be? You are mistaken. Hitsugaya brushed aside, as he glared straight to the rubies that angrily stared back into his, searching. This is not a deal nor is it a debt. If you cannot, then you cannot. It is something called upon if needed. I am not giving up anything nor am I making myself vulnerable. This is a token of loyalty, the very nature and personal embodiment of every dragon. Loyalty, Pyrrhus echoed in a whisper, hesitant. To a master? Toshiro shook his head. To a comrade. A friend. A dragon's loyalty to his comrades and master is everything to our very existence, master. Pyrrhus is young, but has been confined since his youth. Trust is no longer familiar, but rather he is in the wish to be distant in the fear of being hurt. You must be patient with him. Hiranmaru advised as the captain nodded. The subjected dragon had departed shortly after the conversation and had been given a silver collar, adorned with a shard of ice that was reinforced to not melt under any circumstance, serving as a communication device to Sephiroth. The fire dragon merely had to channel his Ryotsu into the crystal and call upon the younger ice dragon, who in turn informed their master. But he is carrying a burden that I do not deserve to place upon him. Toshiro retorted, as he glanced at the dragon tonic he was currently brewing. All I had done was weaken the chains that held him down and then healed him appropriately enough for him to escape on his own. I would hardly call that a debt to be repaid. Perhaps to you, Master. Sephiroth said as the captain added 3 peacock feathers into the sizing cauldron. But to a dragon in confinement who has been under cruelty for more than needed, any assistance is remembered to the death. Especially for the fact that you preserved his pride as a dragon, allowing him to make his own choices by simply healing him rather than forcefully making him escape cowardly, such as being shrunk, or by commanding him as a lowly beast. That makes it more so that it is a debt that he can never repay. There is no debt. Toshiro scowled, annoyed as he poured the finished tonic into several corked flasks. I had only used the softening charm upon his chains for him to cut open to ensure that my spell appeared to be undetected, with visible cuts to the metal as evidence that Pyrrhus escaped himself. Furthering in my alibi in the case of which I was caught up in investigation, the dragon tonic, oculus potion and essence of Dittany was even intentionally unfinished, making their use of prior incantado. Other than providing healing, I have done nothing for Pyrrhus to warrant debt. Especially allowing him to choose, not out of pity nor sympathy, it is something I should not be credited to have given. Sephiroth had the audacity to smirk at the captain's argument. So did Hiranmaru. Damn them. He had done nothing that made one of the eldest of the serpents to be subjected to his debt. Nothing. Master. Sephiroth's words ring true, and yours only reinforce that, as your actions were small but purposeful to allowing the young one to decide, you doing only what you could in careful precautions for yourself. That is why he is indebted to you and loyal to you. Nonetheless, it is no debt. Toshiro argued, his tone stubborn. I would have rather it be an exchange of future loyalty or camaraderie, than a sense of debt. I have too many of those to recall upon, as it is from less than appealing resources. It's too much work to remember all of them anyway. With a flick of his wrist, 7 wiggentree twigs plopped in a slosh into a pewter cauldron, the mixture a bright orange as the captain moodily adjusted the flow of oxygen in the Bunsen burner, allowing heat for the potion to simmer. In any case, I doubt that Fudge will be able to connect that I am responsible, or at least directly involved in the dragon escape of Gringotts, as it is called. Even if Pyrrhus is caught to be in premises. Isn't that why you transfigured him, Master? Sephiroth was haughty. To hide the criminal in plain sight. The best hiding spot is the most outrageous one. I do not lie needlessly. Toshiro shrugged as a dark look marred his expression for a moment, blank eyes fixed on the cauldron that had now settled to a pink. Cutting of the gas, he poured the pink antidote with a wrinkled sniff. The truth will always be in front to those who can realize into seeing. Lies are merely delays to it. Those delays can last centuries, Master. Hiranmaru stated sagely. If played well enough, they can last forever and become the very opposite of what they are. Toshiro agreed as he began to look through labeled containers, returning several to their place and others to the island counter behind him. Just when he was about done, a voice crackled from his Bluetooth, as the captain paused in mid-grab, answering. Hitsugaya Taicho. This is 7th seat, Kokichiro Takezo, reporting, sir. A wizard has requested to see you. He has introduced himself as Draco Lucius Malfoy and has requested for me to tell you, Oolong. Draco. The captain thought swiftly. It has been less than a month, not entirely out of my expectations but albeit a bit early. Voldemort must be desperate. Oolong. After the year was over, the captain had set a system of communication when Draco arrived to his palace, identify himself and then state a tea. The more bitter, the worse his situation was and the vice versa. Bidding the subordinate to escort the blonde in, the captain removed his lab coat and sealed the laboratory before exiting to his chambers, seating himself as he turned his attention to his paperwork. Young master. Taixo sounded several minutes later as the captain continued to work. Draco Malfoy has arrived to see you. Enter. Entering, the ice captain met gazes with his friend, both observing the other. Draco appeared to be dressed in a hurry, his iron shirt wrinkled from exertion with his blazer draped over his shoulders messily, pants long and ending at gray socks. Blonde hair damp and limp, gray eyes greeted the captain's even gaze, unyielding. You look like hell. Draco spoke first, smirking. I suppose you have yet to look at a mirror, was the retort as the blonde seated himself, eyeing the paperwork as the captain spoke, summoning tea as he waved for his paperwork to be put away. No one will overhear anything that we do not want them to. I presume that you have somehow managed to place your mother into safety but your father remains in Azkaban. More or less. Draco sighed as he thanked for the tea, sipping the bitter drink. I had to drug her with the draft of living death after she did not listen to me. She wanted to protect me but did not realize that I was trying to do the same for her, unable to bear the sight of me in the forefront, not after my father had failed the Dark Lord. She believes that it isn't my punishment to bear. It isn't, Toshiro agreed, his own tea before him. However, unlike her, you have a plan. One that coincides with mine and is, more importantly, effective. I have ordered Creature to administer the draft of living death every week into her to keep her under and to notify me as soon as possible in a private wing in St. Mungo's hospital if anything were to go wrong. No one but you, Creature, and I are allowed in or out of the room. He was surprisingly respectful, Malfoy noted, as he bit into a butter cookie. It was most likely due the fact that I had introduced you and that the Malfoys hold a martial link to the House of Black. Creature favored the late elder son of the house along with its last mistress, both believing in pureblood supremacy. Toshiro inquired, as he picked up a cookie himself. And seeing our own status, Creature reacted accordingly but only to those that his former master and mistress would approve of, which is why the Weasleys were most likely excluded. A proper house elf for once. Draco grumbled as Toshiro smirked, biting into his cookie. Do not be too sore over it. Hey. You are too arrogant for your own good, Hitsugaya. The kettle calling the pot black, Malfoy. Just because your predictions and plan are working in scary accuracy, does not mean anything. Draco Mock glared in a ferocity, smirking. I would hope, after all of the planning I have done for you, Draco, that you are not a Death Eater. Toshiro scoffed, rolling his eyes. An incognito Death Eater. The blonde corrected with a mock glare as he grew grimer with every word. The Dark Lord has a newly set system according to Aunt Bella. Young Death Eaters to be that should be honored into servitude of the Dark Lord, having gone through every regulation other than the dark mark on their arm. I was tasked to watch Dumbledore, you, Moody, or any members of the Order, and possibly eliminate. When ordered if things do not go in a favorable direction. Toshiro finished with a smirk as he twirled a butter knife for jam. It has been a while since I have encountered an assassin. Snape has informed Voldemort of my name and status as planned by Dumbledore, but my title is the Heavenly Guardian. And in reaction, Potter is now on a to-be-killed list while you and Snape will serve as spies in the other side. Myself, in the other hand, an enigma that this Dark Lord wishes to learn more about. You appear to be relaxed despite having the world's darkest wizard out for your blood. Draco deadpanned as Toshiro hummed. There's no point in panicking and worrying about the facts, but to prepare. The ice captain snapped his fingers as a set of exquisite robes appeared beside him. Ebony with a silvery lining, nodding for the blonde to take. And it doesn't hurt that you are a bit early in my expectations, Draco. At least, not for me. Draco was not amused. Isn't it a bit early for you to be training me already? Quote. Never, was the reply as the blonde scowled. You said that you didn't want to be a Death Eater, and I have ensured that. I have made it that if Voldemort had tried to, you would be noticed, as I am sure that Snape has well informed Voldemort of my persona. Physical evidence is counterintuitive for a spy after all. Therefore, in the process, has ensured both your life and mine for a bit longer, Draco. But for how long, Toshiro? Quote. Long enough. The transfer nodded to the robes. Now, follow me to the courtyard. We have a limited schedule to train for. The blonde grumbled before sighing, pulling off his clothing and replacing them with the robes. Chapter 19. And to war. 3 years ago. Are you aware of the 4 houses of Hogwarts, Mr. Hitsugaya? Quote. A swift nod toward the headmaster was the captain's response as the said wizard revealed a ragged and stepped on, multiple times at that, hat. This is the sorting hat, which will speak to you, deciding which house you shall be placed in. I see. Will I have a choice in the matter? The captain asked as he was gestured to take a seat, Flitwick having conjured one. I am afraid that is for you to decide, Mr. Hitsugaya. Dumbledore smiled mysteriously as he placed the hat upon the captain's head. Feeling rather foolish with a pointed hat on his head for more than a minute, the captain reached up to yank the filthy thing off when a scraggy and hoarse voice spoke, the captain awakening in his inner world. Above the captain with Sephiroth and SapphireMoons by his side was the sorting hat, his voice echoing in the harsh and howling winds of the snowstorm. A soul reaper, eh? I must say in my years of sorting children, I have yet to meet one like you, boy. How dare you trespass here? This is no place for you to be idling in. SapphireMoons snarled as he made for a lunge at the hat, but paused at Toshiro's raised hand. I will allow you to see into my mind, hat. However, speak of my origins or of who I really am, I will not hesitate to silence you. The captain threatened, his teal eyes glowing with promise. Do not mock me, boy. I reveal none of my conversations to no one, not even the headmaster. Your secrets and your presence shall be hidden with me. Nodding in their mutual agreement, Toshiro lowered his hand as he opened his eyes in the conscious world to find the professors looking rather worriedly at him, only to be interrupted by the hat who had seemingly finished and pondered over his decision. You are daring, have nerve, and brave, even to the point of recklessness. Godric Gryffindor would be proud to have you in his house. However, you are also a prodigy, one of the youngest ones at that, one that Rowena would be fighting to have you into hers. Yet, you possess the cunning and tactician of a serpent, adding to the fact that you are a pureblood. Salazar Slytherin would indeed welcome you as well. But loyalty bounds you, to your subordinates and family, to which Helga would undoubtedly allow you in her own house. Oh, how hard it is to place you, Hitsugaya. How very difficult indeed. Do you have a preference for a particular house, boy? Quote. No, I am indifferent as to what house I am placed in. Toshiro replied mentally as the hat nodded begrudgingly. Very well, then. It shall be, Slytherin. Quote. The ice captain rose a brow at the house that he was placed at, it was reasonable. But with the purpose of investigating the Dementors and watching that Potter boy, his placing of being in Slytherin made things more complicated than necessary. But there was likely more to the dynamics of the housing if they had decided to make him do his sorting here. The captain narrowed his eyes at the heads of the houses and the headmaster. There is more to my sorting held here, isn't there, headmaster? Quote. Dumbledore smiled with mirth. Very astute of you, Mr. Hitsugaya. But yes. Seeing as you are our very first transfer to Hogwarts and to allow you a more, in your grandfather's and father's words, advantaged situation, you will be placed in Gryffindor to the rest of the school other than the necessary staff. You will be given new robes with your temporary house crest and your grandfather has expressed that you would allow the choice to change to your original house when you wish. Very well. But the new robes are unnecessary, headmaster. There's no need to waste perfectly new clothing. I can manage myself. The headmaster smiled. I see. Well, then. I'm afraid that our conversation must be placed in a temporary close, Mr. Hitsugaya. As we must introduce you to Hogwarts, oh joy. It was not even his first official day and he was already lying to all of them. What a great start. It came to no real surprise to the Ice Captain that Draco was able to find out that he was actually of Slytherin, not that he particularly went to extreme extents to hide it. Without the cloak, the Hogwarts uniform was strikingly similar and the only indication of belonging to another house was the crest upon the said cloak along with the inner folds of the house color. But the captain often chose to forego the stuffy thing, too warm for his liking. And it was not like anyone had really asked. They simply accepted Dumbledore's announcement as fact. But Toshiro never explicitly confirmed it. He merely stated, his house, or the dormitory, not confirming that he actually belonged there. Hitsugaya. The Ice Captain pressed a button on his Bluetooth before answering, the only light in the room, an embellished paper lantern flickering quietly. Soifin. Yukataki and I will be arriving in 2 days as requested. The head captain requires that you will return with us for a month after the meeting. We will be traveling by Senkaimon after you apparate us to London. The 2nd Division captain stated flatly, her voice steely. Hitsugaya blinked slowly before replying. Very well. Urahara has set up Gigais and Mod Souls for your arrival as well as appropriate clothing. Did he now? Soifin quipped, her voice irked at the mention of the blonde. I wouldn't think that such an annoyance knew anything about fashion. Even as a former captain. Toshiro rose a brow at the assassin's tone. Yoruichi picked out the clothing for the both of you, Soifin. Urahara was assisting me with the faux dementors. As expected of Yoruichi-sama, she was smug as he noticed a Ryotsu nearing his, nodding for his subordinate to allow his late guest entry to his chambers when the 7th seat gave him a questioning look. Toshiro? Quote. The Ice Captain paused in his phone conversation as the only living person on the grounds appeared, his locks tousled from sleep and dark bags under his slate gray eyes. Another nightmare. Repressing a small sigh, Toshiro placed a finger to his lips to gesture for quiet, indicating to his Bluetooth before nodding for the blonde to seat himself. I will meet you at the entrance to the palace in 2 days as promised, Soifin. Please inform grandfather that I will adhere to his orders and will send him a report soon. Hitsugaya finished fluidly as he placed a hand over the small device over his ear, hanging up as his other hand folded and set aside unfinished paperwork. Malfoy watched blankly, not entirely there. Removing the earpiece, the captain pondering throwing an ink stone to get his friend out of his funk. But after being reminded that such an action was considered impolite and physically damaging, Toshiro settled for speaking. Another nightmare, I see. Draco chuckled dryly. Even with mother in safe hands and father locked away in Azkaban, I still am unable to dispel the thought of the Dark Lord murdering them before me as punishment. My own mind is warring against me in terror in the form of nightmares. It is not a fear that is unfounded. Toshiro waved a hand, summoning a set of freshly brewed tea and thin scones, picking up his after adding a dash of milk. Voldemort is not known for his kindness or mercy. Like you can say the same. Draco snorted, amused as he added 2 sugar cubes to his, preferring no milk. Toshiro rose an eyebrow. I don't deny it. But I am not as ridiculous as to allow people to fear me so much as to need to call me, Dark Lord, or, he who must not be named. How idiotic. Not wanting to speak anymore of the potential murderer of the Malfoy line, the blonde turned the conversation elsewhere, the tea calming as he sipped it every so often as he watched the captain script his paperwork. Who are you speaking to if you don't mind me asking? Quote. Toshiro paused for a moment, his brush lingering at the ink puddle in the stone slab. Was Soifin to be regarded as his cousin or aunt? Be wise, master. Sephiroth warned gravely as Hiranmaru nodded with seriousness. There is nothing more fearsome than a woman scorned. The ice captain stared at his wand guardian and Zanpakuto with a deadpan before ignoring them. Matsumoto never took it well whenever people thought that she was his mother, complaining that she was not as old as to have a child, and I doubt Soifun will take it well neither. Not that the notion of Matsumoto being a mother is not a horrifying thought within itself. I was speaking to my step-cousin, a fellow captain, Toshiro said finally, resuming his work. She was informing me of her arrival along with several members of my family in 2 days. We are to fortify more advantageous negotiations with the British Prime Minister and Fudge's replacement. So, the rumors have been true, then? The minister is being sacked. As of late, Toshiro affirmed with a hum before flickering his glare to his friend, who rose a brow in an inquiry, indicating his full attention was given. At the arrival of my family, grandfather has ordered that I return with them to address some business. I do not know when I will return, but in the meantime, you may stay here with another guest of mine, who had arrived just a day before you did. I would require for the two of you to be civil to one another in my absence. A guest? Malfoy echoed as his friend nodded. I will introduce you when he returns. Toshiro nodded, his words careful. He is our senior and has sworn loyalty to me. Treat him well and he will respond in kind. Do not aggravate him and he will do the same to you, Draco. If you would, please allow Pyrrhus into the loop, Sephiroth. Toshiro requested, as the ice dragon nodded. And with my words, hopefully, the two of them will not kill each other while I'm gone. Pyrrhus is careful enough now for you to be at ease, Master. As well as Draco now that he is a bit more aware of his situation. Hiranmaru reassured as he grinned toothily. You worry too much over your friends, Master. HMPH. Toshiro sniffed as he turned back to Malfoy, who had a thoughtful look. Is he a pureblood, like us? His tone was deceptively curious. Yes, in a way. Toshiro answered. I do suppose that being a dragon does entitle a pureblood status. Although he does prefer to be in only the company of either myself or be alone. Do not be too offended if he holds you in cold regard, he does not care of anyone really in particular, it's not just you. This coming from you? All three dragons huffed as Pyrrhus cut in with a gruff growl, landing in the ground silently as he transfigured into his human form. I do not think that would be much of a problem. Malfoy ran a hand through messy blonde locks before smirking at the captain. After all, you are my friend, and if there is anyone who holds others in cold regard, none does that better than you. Toshiro rose a brow at that, hiding his annoyance. Is that so? Quote. It is. The fire and ice dragons deadpanned as Toshiro ignored all of them. Malfoy had the gall to laugh lightly before nodding, biting into another scone happily, before a thought occurred to him, recalling something as he cursed under his breath. Merlin. I forgot. Forgot what? Toshiro returned to his paperwork, glancing up as the scones and tea were replaced with his work. My own share of paperwork, Malfoy replied as he stood with a hurry, a frown marring his tired face. My father may be in prison and mother missing, but that does not mean his assets and financial empire is taken care of in the meantime. I have to get back to the manor to take care of them. Aunt Bella most certainly will not. Do you know where they are? Quote. Huh? But, of course, my father's office. In the sec. Quote. Then Creature will fetch them for you. The ice captain declared, holding up his still wet brush to stop protests that were sure to come. I will not repeat myself, Draco. You are exhausted and have not gotten more than 4 hours of sleep in the entire time you have been here. You will go back to bed and tomorrow morning, you can begin on your paperwork then. Master, you're not really one to talk. Toshiro. You know exactly why I cannot do that, Draco scowled. But unfortunately for Malfoy, his friend was Toshiro. You can and you will. They will not visit you after our conversation tonight. You can't just command bloody nightmares to go away, Toshiro. The blonde huffed snidely as the captain smirked back. Oh, I beg to differ, Draco. Your tea was administered with slow-acting but equally powerful sleeping draft as well as the potion for dreamless sleep. So, go to bed. Your excuses are invalid. Dismissing his blonde friend with a wave as well as the incredulity sent by Pyrrhus at drugging said friend, the captain turned back to his work, when a soft whisper traced over the room. Thank you, for everything, Toshiro? The ice captain willed himself to not move but instead answered with a hint of mock snide in his voice. Go to bed. It'll be troublesome to both me and my subordinates if you are going to be found in some secluded corner of the palace in the morning. Toshiro heard a soft snort. Like you'll let me. Not when you have someone trailing after me just in case at all times when you are not present with me, and with a bit of good night, the blonde excused himself, not allowing the captain to neither confirm or deny the statement. Instead, the captain pretended to not see the soft smile that his seventh seat had tried to hide when he trailed after Draco. He was getting a bit careless, it appeared. It's a bit endearing to see you being a good friend, Hitsugaya. Pyrrhus chuckled as he appeared in the room, pouring himself a cup of Earl Grey from the side table of the chambers. Although, did you really need to drug him? More than a bit then. Toshiro grimaced before raising an eyebrow at Pyrrhus with a scoff. And yes, I did. 2 days later, the captain frowned as he laced up a pair of formal boots instead of his alternative combat ones, ebony socks stretching from below the knee allowing sight of the pale joint before the hem of matching shorts. Over his torso was a charcoal vest under a gray shirt, a cravat with a bronze pin at his collar, tucked neatly as a bronze-lined blazer billowed loosely over the captain's shoulders. Bone-white locks brushed over one side of his face to reveal only one of his teal eyes. The captain clipped the final latch when the doors to his chambers were pushed open. Hitsu-chan tilde? Quote. Get out, Urahara. And it's Hitsugaya Taicho, Toshiro said without even looking at the former 12th Division captain who undoubtedly was pouting at the harsh greeting. You are well aware that it is rude to enter without announcement. Are you even proper? Quote. But, of course. Urahara smiled as the smaller turned, expression unimpressed. Dressed as chic and professional as the captain, the scientist's blonde mop was brushed under an ebony fedora, his blazer similar to Toshiro's as both were colored in white, the insignia of their respective division, regardless of being former or current. In a dark green shirt under a white tie, the scientist waved an ebony fan with a grin, stepping over in pressed slacks and shined shoes that gleamed in every direction. It is the first time I am going to accompany Hitsu-chan to the ministry. One must look their best when intimidating the opposing party. And you wonder why people don't have a penchant for you. Toshiro snorted softly, as two other Rayatsis appeared, one blushing and the other smirking with a large cat-like grin. Soifun, who was blushing, donned a stunning dress of contrasting white and dark blue stripes, the bodice and ends of the sleeves hemmed with black lace as it fell just above her knees. The matching theme of a blazer hung over her petite shoulders with her division's number on the back. Her black-gray hair was loosened from its usual braided form and instead flowed in soft curls down one shoulder, usually cold steel orbs now wide and larger than usual due to a line of coal. Yoruichi, in the other hand, was amused as she too had a change of wardrobe, her grape hair mussed into a messy bun, clipped with two golden chopsticks. Cole lined her already dangerous eyes as she donned a tight-fitting orange blouse over a pair of pressed slacks, heels hidden under the hems as powerful Kido hid under the sleeves of her blazer, as she smiled at Toshiro. Yoruichi. Soifun. Hitsugaya greeted, his sole eye blank. I suppose Yukitaki is sick again? Quote. Soifun nodded, crossing her arms as she frowned with painted lips. Hana suggested that he can come visit you another time. The head captain had ordered me to come alone with Yoruichi-sama. He did not want to send more people than necessary. Sighing internally but able to see the old man's decision as rational, Toshiro merely nodded at the news before turning back to Urahara with a risen brow. And the preparations? Quote. Urahara held up a black briefcase, patting it with a twinkle of glee in his shadowed eyes before answering. All ready for the minister, Hitsu-chan. Embarking after the ice captain had muttered an invisibility spell for each of them, the four formally dressed captain-class Shinigami apparated before appearing in the London skies, gray and gloomy in the weekday morning. Landing on a platform of spirit particles, they all turned to look at the ebony building that held some of the most important persons of the British Empire. 10 Downing Street. Toshiro mentally labeled as they all carefully made their way to the building, his spell wearing off as they landed in an empty alley nearby. After the fiasco that was labeled the tortuously long name of the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, it was to the attention of several persons that the Ministry of Magic was a tad incapable of what they were supposed to be doing. And with Pyrrhus escaped from Gringotts, it was the final nail on the coffin that was labeled with the scapegoat, Cornelius Fudge. It was an added bonus to the ice captain's opinion. The minister was nothing more than a bumbling old fool for the most part, making him the perfect figurehead to manipulate. But with every new leader into power, came and went new alliances. Fudge's words meant nothing now, and the new Minister of Magics meant everything, along with the other minister. The other minister referred to the Prime Minister of the Muggle government of Britain, one of the few allowed Muggles to be aware of the wizarding world so that warnings of interference from the wizarding world were contained and orderly. It was a simple system, but not one for the likes of Soul Society where the best-kept secret was if the other was dead for good. Or in Hitsugaya's personal favorite, the secrets that no one knew about in the first place. Stepping to the barred gates, a guard with an earpiece and sunglasses despite the light rain addressed them, looking at Urahara. State your business. Ah, yes. I believe we have an appointment with your Prime Minister. The blonde smiled jovially, wide enough to perceive suspicion. We are representatives of the Japanese embassy. Nodding in acknowledgement, the mortal opened the gates, holding an umbrella as Urahara and Soifun held parasols for the four. Entering the entrance hall of cream-colored walls, the former captain waved a hand at the butler's question to take their coats while Hitsugaya and Soifun opted to allow them at their shoulders, billowing behind them as they were led to the white drawing room. It appears that we are early. Urahara smiled as he stood behind one of the couches, fanning his person, relaxed despite the suited men at every exit. Hitsugaya appeared equally civil as he took an armchair by the couch, farthest seat from the fireplace, legs crossed and hands hovering over his stomach. While Soifun nervously took a seat beside an outstretched Yoruichi, the four of them alone in the room as Hitsugaya huffed at the blonde's comment. We are early because it is better to catch your opponents off guard and familiarizing yourself with the diplomatic area. Nothing is coincidence anymore. The ice captain deadpanned internally when a question took him from his thoughts. Who exactly is this new minister, Hitsu-chan? Is he anything like the other one? The she-cat questioned as Toshiro rose an eyebrow at her while Soifun scowled with a hand through her hair, not used to its unraveled appearance. The previous minister was an insult, Yoruichi-sama. Weak enough to bend in my interrogations without as much as a threat. Careful to not mention names, the ice captain shrugged. The new minister is the now previous head of the Auror Office, Hunters of Sorts for Dark Wizards. Therefore, unlike his predecessor, he will most likely try to have a strong stance against the threat to the wizards, but knowing the wizards, they may commit a fatal mistake, one that has already cost them dearly. And what is that? Soifun questioned. A false sense of safety. Yoruichi answered as Urahara and Hitsugaya nodded. Nothing comes good in lying to your soldiers and telling them everything is alright when in actuality, you are only digging deeper into your graves. And with the predecessor in office, that would surely happen. Hitsugaya finished with a lingering glare. But that is not to say he cannot have a prominent role anyway. All four recognized one of the three Rayatsus nearing their location as they all schooled their expressions, Hitsugaya and Soifun in their usual blank masks with a hint of annoyance while Yoruichi grinned playfully with Urahara who did the same behind a fan. So, what to do, Hitsu-chan tilde? We do need you to manipulate the ministry, after all. Do not ask stupid questions, you annoying scum. Era. Such hurtful words. Enough of that. Soifun has a point, Urahara. You know well why there are 4 of us here rather than just me. If we were here for diplomatic conversations, I would have come here with Matsumoto. At this point, our intentions are more than just diplomatic. As if on cue, the doors sounded with a knock and an announcement of their company's arrival. Palming an ebony pouch in his hand, Hitsugaya with his fellow captains, both former and current, turned to greet them. A bony hand held his thin yew hand in the musty air of the Muggle home, almost twirling it in a whimsical manner when he stood, a large python hissing over his shoulder almost lovingly. Her master replied with a soft whisper, quelling her worries as her tail curled over his bony arm. Turning to his company, the Dark Lord turned back to his company. Have the preparations been finished? Quote. The Arankar lifted his glasses to his face. Mortal, you have no status to be questioning me. But I will indulge you. They are ready for your feared heavenly guardian. With a gesture behind him, Voldemort smiled as he caught sight of the 6 Arankar, eyes glazed and bows groveling as he stood.
Unfortunately, this part is over. I hope you enjoyed it. My apologies for all those quotes. Please have a good morning, afternoon, evening or night. See you next time, faves.